part of his busy life just like they do. And it's already working. Tweets like, "Can someone go to church for me, LOL, hashtag sleeping in," have been retweeted over 1 million times by lazy Catholic teens, while tweets like, "If God was real, how come there's so much murder?" and "I'm still Catholic, I just don't go to church or believe in Jesus," have been especially successful with college students who are questioning the church's teaching.
It's really cool to see that the Pope is as active on social media and as skeptical about God as I am. Look, he just tweeted, "I'm not religious, I'm spiritual." That's totally how I feel.
Pope Benedict's aides say his next project involves reaching out to Muslims by sitting down with Islamic leaders and proclaiming his undying allegiance to Allah.
This is the Onion News Network.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
What's up, all of our liberty-loving friends? It's another fantastic episode of Liberty at Night with Nate and Charlie on the Free Talk Live network. I am joined by Benjamin Ayanian, who's a commentator for Young Voices. Ben, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back on.
Why don't you give everyone a little introduction for yourself? You've been on the show a few times before, but if they didn't hear those episodes, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, as Nate, as you said, my name is Benjamin Ayanian. I graduated from the University of Minnesota a little more than a year and a half ago. I majored in philosophy and double minored in business law and political science. I've been writing with Young Voices, which is a nonprofit for young pro-liberty commentators, for about 2 years now. I've been with them, and I'm actually getting ready to go to law school here in the fall.
Nice. I looked into writing for Young Voices. It turns out you need to be young. That's one of the I aged out of their age limit, So
we got to raise the age requirement.
Okay, so one thing we have here today to talk about is a spending package that just sort of, I don't know, flew under the radar. I don't know if people know this, but the government almost shut down. We almost had mayhem around the entire United States. We did luckily find a way to continue funding the government and spend a whole bunch more money that we don't actually have. And you wrote a piece about that. And why don't you tell us some of the details of this? There's, you say the bad, the ugly, and the worst. You didn't say good in any of this. What are some of those bad and ugly things that happened?
Yeah, so as you just pointed out, the title of the article I wrote is "The Bad, the Ugly, and the Worst of the Spending Package." Most people look at, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I didn't think there was much good at all worth talking about. So Congress did, avert a partial government shutdown by passing a $1.2 trillion spending package. The media, this is one of my biggest gripes with the whole event, is that the media, characterized passing this bill as long overdue. Different politicians like Chuck Schumer said that it was exemplary of completing the job, passing this spending package, which really just grinds my gears as someone who advocates for limited government and fiscal responsibility. And Democrats and Republicans get to go to their bases and tout their couple of victories without talking about all of the bad things that they believe the other side got in this $1.2 trillion package as well. And so it's a great opportunity for politicians to push propaganda on voters. Hey, look what I got passed for you guys, without talking about all the terrible stuff that was in the bill they voted for as well. And so I'll start with the bad, and then we can discuss that a little bit. So the bad of this bill, or now law, signed into law, in my view, was the actual contents. And the biggest problem in it, I think, what we should focus on are the earmarks in these bills. So earmarks are just funding, basically, that different representatives, people in Congress can basically get dibs on federal funding for pet projects in their districts, right? And so they get to take federal funding and push it towards their constituents, really is how earmarks work. And there were a couple of really, really odd earmarks now all of them are bad, I would argue. Why is federal funding going to specific state pet projects at all? But a couple of them just to highlight, how ridiculous earmarks can be. $850,000 went to a New Jersey housing development specifically for LGBTQ plus seniors, and $400,000 also went to an organization that creates a handful of services, but one of which is gender affirming clothing for trans youth. Now, I'm not making any comment on the social issues at hand here. That's not what I'm necessarily trying to get at here. But the point is, regardless how you feel about these social issues, whether you support the activity that these groups are engaging in or you don't support it, I think we should all agree that taxpayer dollars should not be stolen and handed off to these special interest groups. If you as an individual want to support these sorts of projects, donate your own money to it, right? That it's your money. You can do whatever you want with it. Politicians should not be forcing this sort of spending on everybody else, the taxpayer base as a whole. And so, Republicans also, they put in earmarks. Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, she secured just under $4 million in federal funding for an airport expansion in Dade County, Georgia. Regardless of how you feel about the airport, why are federal tax dollars going to an expansion of an airport in the state of Georgia? That it's not necessary. And if you thought Republicans were going to save the day outside of Marjorie Taylor Greene and push back on government spending, unfortunately, you were wrong. The GOP was far more focused on banning LGBTQ pride flags from being flown outside of U.S. embassies. They thought that was more important than rolling back spending. They did not stop $200 million that's now allocated to a shiny new headquarters for the FBI in the state of Maryland. So now the FBI can more comfortably spy on and harass American citizens. Glad to see Republicans are really looking out for us. And they also heavily supported a $27.5 billion raise above current funding for the Department of Defense, even though the DoD has failed all of its audits. It's 6 years in a row they haven't passed an audit, yet the Republican Party wants to give the DoD and the Pentagon a massive raise. And so I think that the contents of the bill were the bad of the bad, ugly, and the worst.
Well, I mean, judging by the things that you picked out, I would surmise that you don't care about our troops, you like domestic terrorists, and you hate gay people. Those are the that's my critique of you. Welcome to the news.
Yeah, that's exactly how the discourse goes these days. People, what I find interesting, and I know that you've probably had many conversations about this. The discussions that are had in the media and in public discourse all turn into, as you just made some satire about, they all turn into moral issues. And the idea is, if you don't support taxpayer funding of something, that means you hate whatever people that money is going to. And it's really unfortunate that no one just takes a step back and takes an overview and says, okay, regardless of how we feel about the object of this spending, is it the proper role of government? I think that's the conversation that needs to be had more.
Now, why do we get bills like this, or why is all of this included in one bill that we had to sign to avert a partial government shutdown? It seems like if you want to avert a partial government shutdown, you would just decide to fund whatever things are at risk of getting shut down, and then we'll have some separate bills to discuss whether or not the federal government should give $850,000 towards senior housing for LGBTQ plus seniors or something like that. And if it's important to the people, then the people's representatives will vote on this. Isn't that how it's supposed to work?
It should, and unfortunately, I think the reality is that our politicians don't really work a whole lot. I mean, they're there. I mean, they're in D.C. a decent amount, but they don't do a ton of work. Some of them do. Some of them really care about the issues. They're not just collecting a paycheck. I would say that those individuals are very few and far between. I'll even say a couple names. Thomas Massey, I think, is a great person to follow. Rand Paul is pretty good on a lot of issues. Hopefully, Justin Amash will find his way into the Senate. He's currently running in Michigan right now. So there's a few politicians out there who really, they give a crap and they really look at all the issues. They advocate for better governance. The problem is a lot of politicians are really there for the power. They're there for the dinner parties. They're there for the paycheck and getting to stand on their soapbox instead of actually doing work. And so a lot of these spending bills are negotiated by party leadership in back rooms. The bills are then released to everyone in Congress, really normally less than 2 days before they're supposed to be voted on. And these bills are over 1,000 pages. I mean, very few of these politicians, I would argue none, even the ones that you like, are not going to get through, 1,000 to 1,500 pages in 30 hours to look at all of the nitty gritty details. And even if they did, they would find so much that they don't like that they would vote no. It's a terrible process. We should have single issue spending bills. We should not be funding the entire government and all the pet projects everybody wants 1 to 2 times a year, right? This should be all of these things should be broken up. And oddly enough, the government would probably not be allowed to spend as much money if they did that, because then if you had debate, if you had to spend time voting on all of these separate issues, you probably wouldn't be able to lump this many different objects within a spending bill. And so, the government likes to grow. It likes to, hold on to power. And so it is, they really have an incentive to do it this way because they don't have to work as much and they get to spend more money.
Now, I thought that Republicans were really big on having time to read the bills also. I mean, this is 1,000-page document. It's not even a book. It's a legal document, and much of it refers back to previous parts of the document. You got to go back and say, well, what was 1C, the F, whatever that was. And it probably takes a lot of time to run through it. It's not like this is a page turner or anything for people to go through. And they had the 72-hour rule that I thought Republicans were pretty big on, but they waived that for this bill too.
Yeah, Republicans, push for a 72-hour rule where everybody would be able to have 72 hours. It's just how the rule sounds. 72 hours to read the bill before it would be voted on. Now, 72 hours still isn't a ton. Especially when you have congressional hearings, when these, individuals, they have, different events or obligations that they have to go to. It's not like they could just lock themselves in a room for 72 hours, but at least you could get through a lot of these bills in, 72 hours. Unfortunately, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, a Republican that Republicans fought for, he waived the 72-hour rule, which was a huge slap in the face to all of the Republicans that wanted to see better governance come to fruition under his leadership. He waived the rule, and many Republicans were upset. People who are as different as Marjorie Taylor Greene and Justin Amash. Marjorie Taylor Greene is, I'm not saying I like this term, but at least you know what I'm saying if I say this term. She's a quote-unquote MAGA Republican. And then Justin Amash is a libertarian. Right. And both of them agreed that, this was a huge slap in the face. Marjorie Taylor Greene actually began the process of trying to remove Mike Johnson as speaker, and Justin Amash supported it publicly. He said that we should continue to oust speakers until one of them finally gets it. And at this point, that's probably the only way we're going to get better governance. It was really sad to see Mike Johnson break his 72-hour promise. And he also had a deal last summer. Thomas Massey, I believe, pointed this out at one point on Twitter, or X, if you guys want to find a politician talking about it. But as part of a debt limit deal, I believe it was last summer, Biden agreed to a 1% cut in all discretionary spending if they were still using what are called continuing resolutions to fund the government as of April 30th, 2024. If they were still using continuing resolutions, then he agreed there would be a 1% automatic cut in all discretionary spending. Mike Johnson totally gave up that leverage and pushed this bill through the House and didn't have the spending cuts we wanted to see. Republicans were really big on border security. They did not get border security wins in this bill. Now, I know libertarians, for example, there's a huge disagreement about how to handle the border. And I think that there's actually really healthy debate going on within the Libertarian Party about what that policy should look like. But I just want to point out that was another thing Republicans wanted, whether, we like it or not is irrelevant. The point is that Mike Johnson gave up so much leverage that the Republicans had and pushed this bill through.
Yeah, it's it's kind of crazy that they gave up all that leverage. Do you think, speculating here, but why would Mike Johnson not want to push it to this 1% cut on discretionary spending? And Republicans are always talking about how we have to cut the budget, how we have to spend less money. You're talking 1%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's significant in relation to all of the cuts that never happen to spending. So why wouldn't Mike Johnson want to do that? Is that political implications, election, 2024, stuff like that?
Yeah, the question in my mind, now this is just speculation. I'm not a fly on the wall in any of these back rooms. But what I will say is I think it has to be political. I think the behavior we've seen from Mike Johnson over the last month has shown that political forces are really influencing his decision making. For example, he helped push through the FISA bill, which reiterated that the government can spy on American communications through the FISA program without a warrant, right? Why would Mike Johnson suddenly, be a supporter of this? Who knows who's talking to this guy? Who knows what bureaucrats have his ear? But somehow he's become convinced that these bills that expand the power and the scope, not just the size, but also the scope of government, he's become convinced that they need to be passed even without broad support from his own party in the House of Representatives. It's really head scratching. I wish I had, a crystal clear explanation for it, but in my mind, it has to be political in some sense. Someone has to have his ear and is influencing his decisions in this manner.
One of the things that we always talk about is that, we can criticize these politicians all day and they deserve it. They deserve more of it, more than likely. But really, it comes down to the people, because my guess would be someone told Mike Johnson, hey, if you don't sign this FISA thing and there's some kind of an attack in the U.S., then this is going to be blamed on you for not pushing this through, and you're not going to win another election, and Republicans are going to be blamed for whatever happens in this attack. If you cut 1% of all of the spending, the news cycle is going to be, oh, look how many less Meals on Wheels we had this year. These people don't have any food. They're going to go to every single sad case that they can find, and that's all the media is going to talk about after that. And the politicians see that and they say, well, I want to win re-election, but who is it that's voting for them? It's the people. And so really it's on the people to have the right principles and to have the proper understanding of why, even if an attack happens, well, it's not right for the government to be spying on everyone. That's the cost of freedom, is that sometimes you don't know every single phone conversation that's happening in America. Well, this person didn't get the same government funding this year. Well, that's the cost of not stealing more money from people against their will and inflating the way our currency. Like, you should have the moral principles to be able to see this and have it not affect your vote afterwards. And so I always go back to something, one of my favorite things that Milton Friedman said, was that you don't have to change the politicians. The politicians will do whatever the people that keep them in office tell them to do. You want to change the people. It doesn't matter. If you want AOC to vote in favor of lower taxes, then just have all of her people tell her that she's going to lose her job if she doesn't do that, and she might consider doing it. You know, it's actually up to what the people in each one of these districts want.
Yeah, it's a great. I'm so glad that you brought up that Milton Friedman point, because it's such a great quote. He pointed out, as you said, that we need to change the incentive structure, which is, yes, what do people think? Are they informed? What are they knowledgeable about? He's famously said that, you know, we've tried putting the right people in office and that hasn't worked. The right people, once they get in office, become the wrong people. And it's important for us to make it. I'm not sure if I'm not trying to say these are just my words, because I actually might be quoting him. But he said that we need to make it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing.
That's it for word for word right there.
Is it really? Yeah, oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I'll give myself a pat on the back, I guess, for that one. But it's one of my all-time favorite quotes. I'm so glad that you brought it up, because it's really important for individuals to be informed about this stuff. Now, there's a couple of problems we run into, and you can stop me if you don't want to get too much into the weeds on this. But first, right, we have a chicken and the egg problem, okay? Are we going to have people who basically push the government to become more responsible, more freedom-loving, or is it going to start with a figure? Not like we should never put our hope behind an individual person, or is it going to be a couple of politicians, right? Let's say Justin Amash wins his election. Let's say Thomas Massie, stays in office for a long time. Rand Paul, he's not quite Ron, right? I know everybody loves Ron, but Rand Paul is very good on a lot of issues. Again, he's definitely not Ron, but he is very good on a lot of issues. These individuals, maybe there could become a cohort of individuals. Chip Roy is okay on some issues for sure. He's pushed for more responsible government. They could push these ideas, and then individuals could latch on to the ideas, right? And then people could, change other politicians. So we have a chicken and an egg problem of where's it going to come from? And the second problem, right, that's attached to that is the lack of incentive for individuals to be informed, right? And so that's where I think it almost has to come from a group of politicians first. Like maybe we get our own Javier Milei, in the United States, the Argentinian president. But because there's a great book called, now I'm not advocating for the title, right? The book is a thought experiment called Against Democracy by Jason Brennan, right? It's just a thought experiment. He's not saying to tear down democracy, and I'm not saying to tear down democracy, but it's a great thought experiment about the good and the bad parts of democracy. What would an alternative system look like, and why do we have problems with our current system? He doesn't say we should change our system. It's just an honest examination. And the idea is there is so much that the government does. There are so many stories, so many issues. And on top of that, as a voter, right, not only do you have a life, right, you have a job, you have hopefully, family and friends. On top of that, right, your vote, the odds that you break a tie are next to zero. You have a better chance of getting struck by lightning twice. And so the idea is the incentive structure great for people to be informed?
We'll continue with our interview with Benjamin Ayanian in just a couple minutes on Liberty Unite, the Free Talk Live Network.
I've been told no in many different ways.
I give you an order and you're going to obey it.
Who told you can go this way? You can do that and you have to leave here.
You cannot bring signs into the rally.
Walk with me. Well, I'm comfortable here, actually. Whoa, hey, who do you think you are? Excuse me.
There is no video and audio allowed in this office.
No, I have work today.
You ain't gonna make it.
Wait a minute.
Whoa.
Hey! Oh my God! Unbelievable!
Why are you running from me?
Because you scared me.
What
am I being detained for?
You're being served.
What is this?
You're being served.
What is this?
Bureaucrats Democrats have a funny way of telling people no.
That's the sound of the men working on the chain.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone. The first UN worker killed in Gaza has been identified as an Indian national. 46-year-old Webhav Anil Kale was killed in Gaza when the vehicle he was travelling in came under attack in Rafah. Jody Jacobs reports from the UN headquarters in New York.
A former Indian Army officer, Webhav Anil Kale, became the first international casualty for the world body since the Israel-Hamas conflict started last year. Colonel Kale reportedly took premature retirement from the Indian Army back in 2022 and joined the UN as a security coordination officer in the Department of Safety and Security just 2 months ago. He was traveling with another security staffer to the European hospital in Rafah when their clearly marked UN vehicle was struck on Monday morning. The UN Secretary General has condemned the attack, calling for a full investigation. Close to 190 UN personnel have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. Most of them, according to the UN, are national staff working for UNRWA. Jody Jacobs, New York.
8 people have been killed and dozens more injured in a bus crash in Florida. Highway Patrol said there were more than 50, quote, migrant workers on board when the bus went off the road early on Tuesday morning. Tony Waterman has more.
According to the Florida Highway Patrol, the bus and a pickup truck sideswiped each other near Gainesville around 6:30 in the morning. The bus veered off the road and went through a fence before overturning. Besides those killed, at least 8 others are critically injured, and officials say dozens more have non-life-threatening injuries. Highway Patrol says the bus was transporting farm workers to a local watermelon farm. They are investigating the cause of the crash. Tony Waterman, Texas.
Donald Trump's one-time lawyer Michael Cohen is being cross-examined on the stand at his ex-boss's criminal trial in New York. Cohen says he was responsible for paying $130,000 in return for a porn star's silence. Prosecutors allege that it was done on behalf of Trump and that he falsified business records to cover up an affair with Stormy Daniels. Benji Hire reports from outside the courthouse in Manhattan.
Michael Cohen, Trump's fixer-turned-foe, was asked by lawyers, why did you pay that sum of money, $130,000, to Stormy Daniels? He replied, quote, to ensure the story would not come out, would not affect Mr. Trump's chances of becoming president of the United States. He laid out his accounts of events which effectively imply that Donald Trump personally greenlit this plan in order to avoid it derailing his presidential campaign. That's inside the court. Outside, Speaker of the House of Representatives Mike Johnson, the third most senior politician in this country, claimed that Donald Trump is innocent of these charges. It's not about justice, he says, it's all about politics.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Liberty at Night on the Free Talk Live Network, and we're talking to Young Voices commentator Benjamin Ayanian. I wonder if it takes something bad happening to get people's attention onto that, like Argentina having 200% inflation, and they end up listening to Javier Milei, and they could probably quote more Mises than I could there in Argentina. I wonder if, relatively speaking, we just have it pretty good here in the U.S., and so we think that we can keep running up the credit card, and why not? It's not really affecting us that much. There was some inflation, but they also gave me some money, so it's evens out in the wash or whatever. And I wonder if it's going to take something, with the Ron Paul movement, him filling up arenas. We had the housing crash. We had the bank bailouts. People were upset about that. I unfortunately think a lot of the Ron Paul people in those arenas turned out to be Bernie bros later on, because they were actually just upset about the bank bailouts, and that was their big thing that they were mad about. But a lot of people were exposed to that message. We do need we need an intellectual, we need an economic Jordan Peterson that people will go and listen to for we need Milton Friedman going around to college campuses and talking for an hour or two in a civil way. Not Ben Shapiro going to college campuses and there being protests, but we need a new Milton Friedman, a new Ayn Rand. We need people like that out there spreading this. This is something I did work for Free to Choose for a little bit. I don't know if you know that, but I started their TikTok account for them, and I was putting together all these Milton Friedman videos. That's why I happen to know a lot of Milton Friedman quotes, because I was listening for hours to Friedman, and I was talking to Rob, the guy that runs Free to Choose, and I said, man, what we need is we got to find a new Milton Friedman. Like, this is great. These videos are awesome. But Free to Choose needs to have a new Milton Friedman out there going around the campuses talking to people. And I don't know who that person is yet. You got any ideas?
I'm not sure who that person is either, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Milton Friedman had an uncanny ability to speak to a room of people who weren't experts on economics. Now, I don't think economics is a particularly complicated subject, and it's not. The media says it is, and people want you to think that it is, right? What we think of economics these days is not how I like to think of economics. Numbers, a lot of equations, measuring GDP, this, that, and the other. What I think is most important is understanding the basic principles of economics. Thomas Sowell wrote a great book called Basic Economics. I highly recommend reading it. It's super long, though. So Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. It was written in the early 20th century. But it's much shorter, and it's a great book about the basic economic principles. Milton Friedman wrote Capitalism and Freedom. So that's another great book to learn the principles of economics. And we need someone like Milton Friedman to go out in the world and discuss the basic principles of economics. Now, I love talking about economics. I write on economics. I go on podcasts, TV shows. I speak about economics. I don't have an economics degree. I am not an economist. I don't think that that's necessary to do what Milton Friedman did. I don't quite have the same, I think, really special God-given ability that he had, but we might not have a Milton Friedman right now that we see, but what we need are individuals who come on shows like these, right? You interview a lot of libertarian-minded individuals. I mean, the show is called Good Morning Liberty. You're, a libertarian-minded individual. You understand the basic principles of economics. We need people like, show hosts like you. We need commentators, people like me, other people at Young Voices. We need professors who are libertarian minded to speak up. We need, maybe we don't have that iconic figure. And maybe that iconic figure will arise, but we need a group effort until that happens, because it's just too important to let this continue on, or we will end up in a Javier Milei, Argentina situation.
Speaking on economics, you were saying people say it's super complicated, but it really isn't. It's just talking about how human beings react to incentive structures that are in front of. That's all it is. We can tell you it's not like libertarians or free market economists know the future or have a crystal ball, but it's common sense how human beings are going to react. And all these people who think about planned economies and that they can change the outcomes, they're basically saying that they can override millions to billions of human beings and how they're naturally going to react to the incentives in front of them. And that's why they end up being wrong most of the time. People react to the incentive structure that's laid out in front of them.
Thomas Sowell is one of those figures. Thomas Sowell's still alive. Now, he's close to 100 years old. Yeah. So he's not quite as active as he once was, although he had a book come out relatively recently. The guy's written like a million bajillion books. He's fantastic. He had that same sort of ability that Milton Friedman had to discuss these sorts of principles with people. Don't listen to the media. Don't listen to politicians who tell you that economics is super complicated and that you don't understand it. It's all about principles. Forget forget the numbers. Truly, sure. If the inflation hits double digits, be concerned, right? Understand those sorts of numbers. But generally speaking, if you have the inclination to learn about economics, it's all about principles. It's all about understanding what effect certain policies will have on individuals in society. The economy is not this machine that we can go in with wrenches and screwdrivers and get it to run exactly how we want. It's an organic creature, right? It is made up of the decisions of hundreds of millions of individuals in the United States and all the people that we work with, trade with, contract with around the world. That's what makes up the economy. It's people. It's not politicians. It's not numbers. It's the freedom to contract. It's the price system. It's the buying and selling of goods and services. That's what the economy is. All you have to do is learn the principles of it, and public policy discussions will become so much easier, really, to dissect as just an average consumer of news.
And it feels like a really great time to talk quickly about your book that just came out. Yeah, why don't you tell everyone about that?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the plug here. I just released a book. The e-version, the Kindle version has been up since April 3rd, but the paperback just got released last week. It's titled Beyond Intention: How Progressive Economic Policy Initiatives Would Harm Society's Most Vulnerable. No, it's a bit of a mouthful. That second part's just a subtitle, though. So Beyond Intention is about the most hotly debated progressive economic policy initiatives, right? I picked a handful of them, from raising the minimum wage to enacting rent control. I also discussed free higher education. Progressives want free college and universities. They also want Medicare for all, and they want wealth taxes, right? So those were the 5 that I focus on there. I take readers through each of those policies one by one in their own separate chapter, discussing why do progressives want to implement these policies? What issue are they trying to combat? Right? What data are they seeing that tells them this is a necessary policy, right? Who are they trying to help? And then I discuss, okay, what do basic economic principles tell us about how these policies would work in effect? And then I look at real world data to show that, in fact, these policies don't fix the problem progressives are trying to attack. Instead, they actually hurt the most vulnerable members of society even worse. And at the end of each chapter, I also give an alternative policy proposal to fix the original issue that progressives were looking at. I'm sure you can guess, it's a free market oriented alternative solution in all 5 chapters. But I really hope you guys check it out.
Yeah, for sure. And this is such an important topic that you're writing on, because I happen to believe that a lot of these people who push for these policies, I try to look on the bright side and think that they truly do want to help people, and they truly do care about people, And I wonder what they would change about what they're advocating for if they truly understood that these policies do not help the people that they're trying to help, that they're actually hurting the people that they're trying to help. And I mean, if they really, truly came to that understanding, would they still be pushing for these policies? Because maybe we can look at the government and say, well, they're pushing for this because they want to increase their tax base, or they want to help this corporation or that corporation. But a lot of people on the ground, they care about these things because they care about the poor and they want to help them. And so it's very important for them to understand that that's not what they're doing, even if that's what the intentions are. You got to go beyond the intentions and actually look at what you're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're 100% right. I think differentiating between the politicians and the voters, let's say, who support these policies, I think that's a really salient point to make that you just made. So the politicians have their special interest groups. They're beholden to other forces that, we don't like, that we don't know about. I like to think at least some of them believe what they're saying. Like AOC is a really young person, right? She's a millennial. I think she's a millennial. Lena Khan is a millennial, the head of the FTC, right? I think that they probably believe what they're saying. I know Elizabeth Warren was a very big, I think she was a very big political activist for a long time. I know Hillary Clinton was a political activist for a long time. She's not quite the same bold of progressive that the other ones I discussed were. But the point is that some politicians might believe at least most of what they're saying. Some believe none of what they're saying, and it's just a power grab. Bureaucrats, particularly a lot. And there's some good bureaucrats out there. Like there's some good people who just want to help. There's other individuals that just want to rise up the ranks and have a high power position in the government, in a government where there is more power. But the voters, 100%, if they are not, let's say, gaining anything outside of maybe social acceptance from peers who think how they think, peers who think how they think, and also a good feeling on their insides that they're fighting for what's righteous and just, right? If that's all they're gaining out of it, I think it's safe to say that those voters truly believe what's being sold to them by the propagandists in government. And so you and I have had discussions on this podcast before about should libertarians be focusing on pushing principles, right, or pushing results of policy? And both are equally important, because if people don't understand the principles, even if you enact those policies, even if you get good results for a while, it might not be enduring, right? If people don't truly understand why those policies are working, it might not be enduring. And so that's why I try to do both. I look at the basic principles in my book, so more, economic theory, stuff, the principles of basic economics. And then I look at the results, because I think that if we want to, let's say, convert, quote unquote, progressives, right, or just Democrats, or even the middle of the political spectrum, to pro-liberty ideas, I think the hook has to be the results, right? If you just tell them we love freedom, we want people to make their own decisions, I mean, they've heard that before, and they think that, well, I don't like their decisions, right? I don't support that. But I think that's what they would say. I think that if we start with, here's the results of the policies you support, and here's the results of the freedom policies that we support, I think then they might be on the hook at that point. And then they might dive a little bit deeper into the issues, and they might start to learn how these pro-liberty principles are actually, there's a great moral argument for them. And I think that they could then, grasp onto that. But it's my view that to get the people on the fence and far away from the fence to hop over the other side, I think it has to start with the results of policy to get them interested. But that's just my 2 cents.
So, big thanks for Benjamin Ayanian coming on the program this week. I also caught up with another guy we're going to hear from here right quick, Mike Termott. Mike Termott is a libertarian presidential candidate, 2024 presidential candidate. We've had him on the show a few times. And at the end of our interview, which is what I'm going to be letting you guys listen to, you can go to our podcast, Good Morning Liberty. You can go to BernieLies.com in your browser, search Good Morning Liberty on your podcast app, and listen to the entire interview. But I asked him a very important question at the end of our hour-long conversation. So I'm not a member of the Libertarian Party, even though I identify as a libertarian. I'm just not a member of the party. And I don't really know why. I used to be a member of the party. I dropped out because I didn't like the leadership, and then they changed leadership, and I still didn't join back up. So I had a conversation with Mike, and I asked him, why should I, or other people listening who aren't members of the party but might also be libertarians, why should we join the Libertarian Party? And then why should we vote for Mike over the other presidential candidates? So I think he had a really good answer, and I'd recommend you going to our podcast channel and hearing our entire conversation. Here's his answer.
The Libertarian Party pursues values and announces values, makes known values that align with yours, that align with Americans, that align with the reasons why our Constitution was put together. We are, after all, the philosophical descendants of the people that wrote the Declaration of Independence and put together our federal government for the sole legitimate purpose of protecting our liberty. A lot of bullshit has happened since then in the name of that government and in the name of Americans. But the truth of the matter is that the Constitution was put together to protect our individual liberty, and we are the party that represents an interest in keeping the Constitution doing that. Indeed, there are many people in the Libertarian Party, frequently including myself, that believe we need to go back further than just getting back to the Constitution, that we need a Constitution that has a little bit more teeth in terms of protecting our liberty. But having said that, there is not a good alternative today to the Libertarian Party. And by that, I don't just mean the Republican Party has gone in a really dopey direction, which it has. The Democratic Party has gone in a really dopey direction, which it has. But it is also true that it is no longer really a viable option to do nothing. Now, we should probably argue that it was never a really good option to do nothing about this. You know, looking back on the 60s feels a lot different than looking back from 1975. We now know that we have been launched upon a path that will lead to the financial collapse of the U.S. federal government. That is something that is worth stopping. The growing sense of authoritarianism in the United States is something worth stopping. Terminating a foreign policy that is set up with the apparent sole goal of projecting military hegemony, that is something worth stopping. And stopping not just for your sake, certainly not merely for mine, right? But for a hell of a lot of people out there, people who can't spell libertarianism, right? Who don't know the Libertarian Party exists, but people for whom we need to stand up. Money is taken from fellow Americans all the time, forcibly, including families who can least afford it, and it is used in a way that does not align with their personal values. We know that politicians and bureaucrats do not operate with the same set of principles, the same set of ethics as you do, because they make decisions that you wouldn't make. And by you, I mean you literally, yes, but you and me and the rest of America. Americans would not decide, by and large, to invade Iraq and Afghanistan and kill over 1 million people. That is not something that most Americans would decide to do, and it is not something with which Americans are okay. Nor is the typical American okay with accumulating $35 trillion in debt. These are things that our government does because it is run by people with different values than you have and different values than I have. All of this is worth stopping. And I would argue that 2024 is therefore not merely a huge opportunity for the Libertarian Party, but an obligation to get this right. If we don't do it, do you see a Republican politician likely to stand up for a constitution of delimited powers and fiscal conservatism, a Democratic politician standing up for an anti-war message? I don't see that happening. Nor do I see letting the system go and thinking it's going to right itself, right? I don't see that happening. And so, however you and I may have felt 30 years ago when we lived in perhaps a more naive time, now that we know what we know, do we have the right to do nothing about it? I'm not sure how I feel about that. Now, that doesn't mean like I want to impose on you personally some obligation to do something that I would do, right? But you get where I'm going, that I've always felt that a core element of libertarianism, and I understand a lot of people would probably not completely agree with what I'm about to say. A core element is that not only should you be living your life by your own standards because the government doesn't have a right to tell you what to do, but the world is better off when you lead your life by your own standards. It is the way our society progresses. It is how our culture progresses. You have an obligation to live your own life, to pursue happiness in whatever weird, messed up way you define it. It's an obligation to your fellow Americans. It's an obligation to your faith, if you come from a faith-based philosophy as I do. I think that it's how our species works correctly when we pursue what it is that our lives suggest is in our own interests. And I would argue that the same principle applies in a larger political sense. We have a bit of an obligation to America at this point, because there's just no one else who is going to stand up for the civil liberties of our fellow Americans. That's why I'm running for president. And that's why I think that people like you who are so damned libertarian minded, and I don't really care. I hope Angela's not listening. I don't really care if you don't send her, the $50. I think you should. But I would like you to get involved politically. I would like to see people like you run for office. I'd like to see people like you get involved with, how the party works and helping other candidates. And I would like to see you encourage other people to do so. And again, because I just don't see another vehicle that can do that.
That was good. You almost got me.
The Goon Squad will be there tomorrow.
No, I told you, just so everyone
going back to Plan A.
Just so everyone listening knows, I told him beforehand that he could give it his best shot, but there was absolutely no way in hell I was going to capitulate live on air to doing something someone else was telling me to do. But you're very close. I'm not going to lie. That's the closest I've gotten right there in a long time, since the last time I actually joined. So I'm going to have to
think about coming out to the convention in Washington across Memorial Day weekend. We'll have a good time. You'll have a good time. By the way, free cookies and coffee at my exhibit table. By the way, just by the way, okay. If the Goon Squad and the philosophy didn't work, let me just go straight to bribery. Free cookies and coffee at my exhibit table, and we'll talk about it. And you might find that you just have a good time, and there's nothing wrong with that either.
So let me know what you thought of Mike's answer to that question. You can send me an email, nate@goodmorningliberty.us, or you could tweet us or post us or whatever, Good AM Liberty, if you want to do that. So go to BernieLies.com in your browser. That'll bring you to all of our links, YouTube, merch store, all that stuff. Join gmail.com so you can join the live group, the Fed Haters Club, or just find Good Morning Liberty on your favorite podcast app. We got more Liberty at Night on the Free Talk Live Network coming up.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Tired of the ever-inflating US dollar? You can live your life on Dash instead with some handy websites. BitRefill.com has been accepting Dash for years and has a ton of big-name retailers and brands, including grocers, gas stations, phone refills, Amazon, and even prepaid MasterCards. Plus, many of their gift cards are available at a discount. But what about paying your bills? Spritz.finance can do that, and they can send dollars to your bank account in case you still need those for some reason. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
The latest episode of Free Talk Live continues with Hour 2 up next after the news, here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone. The first UN worker killed in Gaza has been identified as an Indian national. 46-year-old Webhav Anil Kale was killed in Gaza when the vehicle he was travelling in came under attack in Rafah. Jody Jacobs reports from the UN headquarters in New York.
A former Indian Army officer, Webhav Anil Kale, became the first international casualty for the world body since the Israel-Hamas conflict started last year. Colonel Kale reportedly took premature retirement from the Indian Army back in 2022 and joined the UN as a security coordination officer in the Department of Safety and Security just 2 months ago. He was travelling with another security staffer to the European hospital in Rafah when their clearly marked UN vehicle was struck on Monday morning. The UN Secretary-General has condemned the attack, calling for a full investigation. Close to 190 UN personnel have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. Most of them, according to the UN, are national staff working for UNRWA. Jody Jacobs, New York.
8 people have been killed and dozens more injured in a bus crash in Florida. Highway Patrol said there were more than 50, quote, migrant workers on board when the bus went off the road early on Tuesday morning. Tony Waterman has more.
According to the Florida Highway Patrol, the bus and a pickup truck sideswiped each other near Gainesville around 6:30 in the morning. The bus veered off the road and went through a fence before overturning. Besides those killed, at least 8 others are critically injured, and officials say dozens more have non-life-threatening injuries. Highway Patrol says the bus was transporting farm workers to a local watermelon farm. They are investigating the cause of the crash. Tony Waterman, Texas.
Donald Trump's one-time lawyer Michael Cohen is being cross-examined on the stand at his ex-boss's criminal trial in New York. Cohen says he was responsible for paying $130,000 in return for a porn star's silence. Benji Heyer reports from outside the courthouse in Manhattan.
Michael Cohen, Trump's fixer-turned-foe, was asked by lawyers, why did you pay that sum of money, $130,000, to Stormy Daniels? He replied, quote, to ensure the story would not come out, would not affect Mr. Trump's chances of becoming president of the United States. He laid out his accounts of events, which effectively imply that Donald Trump personally greenlit this plan in order to avoid it derailing his presidential campaign. That's inside the court. Outside, Speaker of the House of Representatives Mike Johnson, the third most senior politician in this country, claimed that Donald Trump is innocent of these charges. It's not about justice, he says, it's all about politics.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more detail today at the civil unrest in Georgia, where riot police have taken on protesters demonstrating against a new foreign agents law passed by the country's parliament. The law, backed by Moscow, requires organizations to register as foreign agents if more than 20% of their funding comes from outside Georgia. It's similar to laws that have been used in Moscow to silence Kremlin critics. Anne McElvoy, executive editor of Politico Europe, says the law has become a lightning rod for Georgians who fear that Vladimir Putin has territorial aspirations towards their country.
There's always been an independent streak to Georgians, and even in the Soviet period, they were a bit more freewheeling. This attempt to impose very Putin-style law, which basically says that if you have any contacts or receive any funding for your organization from outside the country, then you're a foreign agent. This just has the smell of a kind of Putin-style attempt to clamp down on anything outside the control of those who want to keep control of what happens inside Georgia.
Opposition parties in Georgia say one byproduct of the law is that it will damage Georgia's efforts to join the European Union. Protesters on the streets of Tbilisi say the government's move to pass the law is a direct capitulation to pressure from the Kremlin. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again. A United Nations staffer killed in Gaza has been identified as an Indian national who was travelling in a vehicle that came under attack. A bus crash has killed 8 people in the US state of Florida. Highway Patrol said there were more than 50, quote, migrant workers on board. And Michael Cohen is being cross-examined in the criminal trial against his former boss, Donald Trump, who is accused of falsifying business records. There's more from us on Twitter at Feature Story. And that's the latest from Feature Story News. Caroline Malone reporting.
After briefly reviewing several documents outlining his parents' dire financial circumstances today, 23-year-old Wesleyan University graduate Zach Wallace told reporters he had, quote, absolutely no clue how his mother and father are going to dig themselves out of the $35,000 of student loan debt they incurred to pay for his college education.
I mean, this is going to be really hard on my parents. When I was in college, I just assumed that, they would pay off my student loans within a few years of me graduating. But I never realized how expensive college is going to be for them.
Wallace, who graduated with a film studies degree in 2012 and has since had 2 unpaid internships, told reporters that from the way prevailing interest rates are trending, his parents could easily be paying off his debt for the next quarter century.
They're going to be paying for the rest of their lives. And on top of it all, they have to help me out with my rent, too. I mean, it sucks. It really, really sucks.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
Well, what's up, all of our liberty-loving friends? This is another fantastic episode of Liberty at Night with Nate and Charlie on the Free Talk Live network, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. With fees of less than a penny per transaction, Dash is made for spending. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol and in multi-crypto wallets. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month for this sponsorship. It's easy to get and use Dash. You can learn more at dash.org. That's dash.org. Of course, this is Liberty at Night with Nate and Charlie on the Free Talk Live network, but we go by another name, and that's Good Morning Liberty, where you can find 1,239 episodes of Liberty Goodness on our podcast channel. You can get to that by searching Good Morning Liberty on your favorite podcast app, or by going to bernielies.com in your browser. You can also go to YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, all that stuff. Tons of videos out there, TikTok, X, Facebook, all the pages. You can go to godhatesfeds.com and get t-shirts and mugs and stickers and all sorts of stuff like that. You can get a Javier Milei t-shirt. You can get a God Hates Feds t-shirt, taxation and theft stuff. You know, your standard libertarian practices out there. Or you can go to joingml.com, and that's where you can join the Fed Haters Club. God Hates Feds, we got the Fed Haters Club, all those sorts of things. And you can hang out live with us every single day of the week when we want to. So you want to do that. Our co-host Charlie is not here today. Actually, he is. Charlie, yell hey. Hey! Okay, he is here, but he's not on camera right now. Sorry, I've never done that before. I just thought that I should do that real quick. I am joined on camera, though, by Donald Kimball, who's the communications manager for the Washington Policy Center and a contributor for Young Voices. Donald, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm breathing a big sigh of relief now that the internet is saved from net neutrality here.
Luckily, we were able to do this interview because without the FTC, I don't think that we would have been able to do it. So as you're alluding to there, we're going to talk a little bit about net neutrality today. And why don't we start off by you just kind of giving everyone a synopsis of what that even is?
Yeah, so net neutrality is a principle. It's not actually an official law or rule or anything. It's a principle that says that all internet traffic should be treated equally. There should be no priority lanes of faster or slower depending on the services. To avoid more of the technical jargon, just having to do with different services or different providers can't treat traffic differently. And this has been implemented through retitling the internet, which has not been a Title II classification like your phone lines or whatever. And that's what the FCC is doing and did in 2015 when they initially instated the Open Internet Order that included net neutrality, which gave the FCC control of broadband networks like they had control over phone lines. That was undone in 2017, and now it's been redone as of a couple days ago with the new safeguarding and securing the open internet. So the reclassification of the internet under Title II is the policy change, and that includes net neutrality, this principle that people use sort of as shorthand for the move.
My first question is, and honestly, I wanted to wait until later, but as you explain those things, the main question I have is why? What need have we been shown whatsoever is there for the government to do this?
So that's one of the fun pieces about this is it's a lot of hypotheticals. It's a lot of this could happen, or if we don't make this change, this will happen. And as we saw, these official regulations were not in play from the creation of the internet through 2015, and there are no concrete examples that proponents of net neutrality can point to of this kind of slowing down or censorship or anything like that. And then in 2015 to 2017, there was net neutrality. And then since early 2017 through now, there has been no net neutrality, and they still cannot point to examples. One example you may hear brought up is an example of California firefighters. They're putting out fires, they used their data, and then they got throttled and slowed down. And people say, aha, this is what happens when you don't have net neutrality. This has been thoroughly debunked. This was a mobile carrier with a data plan agreement that they had made before. It would not have been affected by net neutrality. And as soon as Verizon, who was the carrier, found out of the situation, they instantly stopped throttling them once they could make that communication like, hey, we need this for an emergency. So all of the examples of the current harms are all debunkable, and all of the harms they will list are yet to be seen and just frankly don't exist yet. They can't actually point to real examples.
And so those are the whys that they give us when people like us ask the question. Like that's part of the marketing for doing this. And since there isn't really a case behind any of those things, is there another possible why behind it? Like, what could they do by reclassifying this and having more control over the internet? I mean, I don't want to get into too much speculation, but let's speculate wildly about that.
Yeah, well, that's the tricky thing. So if the arguments were purely defensive in that net neutrality solves for a problem that doesn't exist, but that was it, I think that, it might be a weird hill to die on, right? But unfortunately, as we've seen, the reclassification of the internet in this way actually has pretty negative effects all around. Now, as to what they want to do, well, they're making some claims about wanting to make sure that there is competitive behavior between internet service providers. That is already taken care of by the FCC the FTC in our current system. They talk about wanting to safeguard for national security threats, like being able to swap out Chinese equipment. That authority also already exists with the federal administration. I believe it's the executive branch has the authority already to do that kind of thing. So even their cases for positive, the best motives, they're already done. What this does allow the FCC to do is just have a much broader control over what broadband networks can and cannot do. And they get to set arbitrary rules as to what is or is not fair or unfair practice. And it's just another way the government sort of tips the scales and puts their thumb on them directly, which we just see has bad consequences all around.
So when Trump destroyed the internet in 2017, did we actually see things get worse like all the doomsday scenarios predicted, or did things actually get better during that time for the internet?
Yeah, we saw things got better, and there's I've gotten 2 articles on this, and the first one, I sort of addressed the 5 big myths of net neutrality that didn't happen, and so they talked about how ISPs were going to censor information that they didn't like, they were going to slow down providers they didn't like, businesses were going to stop investing in the internet, and what we saw was quite the opposite on almost all fronts. We saw that investment in our networks actually increased every year except for recessionary years, and then in the net neutrality years they flatlined and then they went down a little bit. So the only years we saw a decrease that were not recessionary years were the net neutrality years. We saw increasing access during non-net neutrality years that stifled a little bit during those net neutrality years, and we saw prices decrease and speeds increase all during non-net neutrality years. They again stagnated a little bit in net neutrality years. But the biggest sort of damnation for the case against, or for the case for net neutrality, is when you compare the number one most high intense moment of internet usage in the world, which was the COVID-19 pandemic. You look at the United States and how we handled it, and then you look at Europe. Now, Europe has net neutrality styled regulations. So when everyone was at home, everyone was forced to work from home if they could, or a lot of people couldn't work, and so they were using things like Netflix, and they were using streaming services like YouTube and gaming. When this happened, the United States, all of our networks held together. We did not have to have the government step in and throttle certain providers, and that's not the case in Europe. Europe, they literally had to go to Netflix and YouTube and maybe a couple of others that I'm not aware of, and they said, hey, you're using too much bandwidth. Our networks can't handle this. You have to throttle it. So Europe had a worse experience when it mattered most. So again, one of the claims that people who are in favor of the SSOI say is that, we saw during COVID that the internet is an essential service and we need to close the digital divide and get people more access. But if you actually want to do that, you want to run as far away from net neutrality as you can, because net neutrality networks do not hold up when it is needed the most.
I'm sorry, but I can't get over how funny it is that when they were at this peak usage in Europe, they had to go to these people and tell them to throttle them, which is one of the things that they say net neutrality is going to cause people to do. I mean, how ridiculous is that?
Well, everyone gets throttled equally. So, we're all poorer together.
Oh, my gosh. So why do you, I guess talking I don't know if you're a free market guy. I really know nothing about your politics whatsoever. So I'm a free market guy. And I guess I'll ask a leading question. Why do you think it is that our networks were so much better at handling all of this increased traffic? Why did they increase their investments and build out more infrastructure? Why did that naturally happen without the government telling them to do so?
Wow, that is I couldn't possibly imagine. No, it really is the case of the less regulatory fog you have in a sector, the more incentivized people are to try things, to invest, to experiment. Now, one of the areas I think that we could vastly improve upon in the United States, probably globally as well, is choices for broadband providers, right? But even in the years of non-net neutrality, we've seen increasing access to different services like Starlink, or even other carriers like T-Mobile and AT&T expanding their 5G access. So more places are getting this competitive drive, even though it's not a perfect framework of free market enterprise. We are seeing the less heavy-handed regulations, the more these companies are incentivized to invest, to build out the infrastructure, to create more options. We see prices go down and access go up. And so that when it comes to the pressure point of something like COVID, you have these robust options. You have all of the money that's been put in from these networks that want to make money. They want to serve customers. And in doing so, they've provided the infrastructure that holds up during times of duress, which is frankly, it benefits us all. So, the FCC's regulations and what they do or don't allow, especially when it comes to net neutrality, it can also prevent companies from wanting to invest in new technologies that they're not currently using or aware if they'll work. Since the open internet order in 2015, we have continually seen companies rely on 5G network slicing, basically dedicating certain bands of the same internet signal to go to different services. So for instance, if you have heavy machinery on a construction site that uses network data, you need low latency, right? It needs to be able to react really quickly to what's going on. It does not necessarily need high portability. It doesn't need high range because it's not going to be moving anywhere. So that's one band of a network that can be used. A bulk data transfer, if you're backing up massive database files, that doesn't need high or low latency because, it's just moving. It doesn't need responsive time, but it does need a lot of bandwidth usage. So different bands can be used in this. Under current net neutrality rules, it's not even clear that this would be allowed. Now, certain companies have made a request for the FCC to grant exemptions to this kind of traffic and usage. But the point is that without the regulatory fog, this kind of thing was able to be created and innovated to begin with. With the regulatory fog of uncertainty, would this be allowed? Would it not? It's not even clear that this kind of thing would be innovated in the first place. We don't even know about the future tech we will be using and will be relying upon in the future. And so that's one of the other side effects of having the FCC so heavily involved is companies look at that and think, if I invest all this time and energy into researching this technology, I don't even know if it's going to be allowed. So why should I even bother?
So one thing I'm wondering while you're talking about this is why do we need the FCC anyway? I guess I'll test your political theories here. I don't really know what you're going to have to say about that. But what bothers me is, I don't know, has this rule gone into effect yet?
Yeah, so the signing, I'm not actually sure what the effective date is. There will be rolling out changes and things like that. There are also several states. Washington State, where I'm based here, was also the first state in the country to pass our own net neutrality rules. So there may be some time of trying to integrate some of those. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to handle that yet. But the formal vote did happen. There will also be legal challenges to this. So maybe that's the other thing I will say here is that it's not a done deal in the sense that even if it takes place today, there are going to be court challenges to it, whether or not the FCC has this kind of authority. As for the purpose of the FCC, it depends on how minarchist or anarchist we want to go here. But maybe the best case scenario is that it was an agency that oversaw telecommunications when they were first created to enable some kind of fair playing field. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of what the FCC is trying to do now is using old, outdated regulatory framework for new, modern innovations, and that doesn't really help anyone out. So, whether or not the FCC even has this authority has kind of changed since between now and 2015 in terms of what the Supreme Court has ruled. They've kind of done away with the Chevron doctrine, and they've been chipping away at that for some time. And that was one of the big justifications for the FCC's ability to make this kind of change. But it seems like the Supreme Court now is giving more and more burden for agencies making kinds of changes that affect a vast majority of Americans and affect them monetarily in a major way. And so because this affects the internet, and the internet is obviously a very critical piece of infrastructure in the United States and affects people in this way, it's not clear whether or not the FCC will actually be able to make this kind of change on their own without legislation from Congress.
Well, that's one thing I was going to ask is, were there any court cases during the couple of years that this was actually in place before, or was it gotten rid of before that actually made it in front of a judge?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, nothing made it all the way up. I believe that I don't know of anything that made it up its way to the Supreme Court. There may have been some cases working their way there, but the timing of it was also right. That was 2015, and then the election of Donald Trump all but guaranteed that he would get an appointment on the FCC so that the votes would be in favor of the repeal. And so that's when we saw Ajit Pai take over as the FCC chairman. Early 2017 is when we were able to roll that back. So I think there have been a few legislative pushes, but I don't know about court cases. I believe like Ed Markey, Senator Ed Markey was someone who sponsored some bills that have been trying to legally implement net neutrality by way of the legislature, which would be the way to do it. I don't think you should for the reasons I've described, but for it to stand sort of constitutional muster, that would be the appropriate way. So if a bill passed, for instance, then I don't think there would be a court case to challenge it necessarily.
I was going to ask you as a final question, what your outlook was for the internet in general, if this were the law of the land and stayed in place. And while I was thinking about that question, I realized that we are going to arrive at an unseen problem here because we're not going to know what we are missing out on. And we might not have, we can look back on the COVID pandemic now and we can say, yeah, that's great that the internet was able to grow and beef up infrastructure and have plenty of data speeds for everyone around the country. But if net neutrality would have stayed in place, we might have just been in a time period where we said, oh, these companies are doing a terrible job. They're not able to supply people with enough bandwidth. And that's, so I didn't even know where to arrive with the question because of our potential unseen problem. Do you have a negative outlook for the future of the internet if this stays in place?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to commit the crime that the pro-net neutrality people do, which is to lament about things in the future we can't be sure of. But when we look at the data of the past, we do see a pretty clear picture. Now, people are going to come at me, oh, correlation does not equal causation. But when you have this many corollary factors, all things, withstanding, it's kind of like it does tell a story. You should at least be able to glean some bit of information from this, comparing Europe and the US, non-net neutrality years versus net neutrality years. So what I will say is I don't think the internet will crash and burn. I don't think we're going to see a doomsday unlike any day before us. But what I will sort of hypothesize here is that access and speeds will not go in a positive direction at the rate that they have been. I don't think we will see a continued decreasing price for speed access in the same way. And it's not like the kinds of internet usage we have today is what we will have in 10 years. It will probably greatly expand the burden and the capacity we need for that. And so in that sense, it is a little worrisome if we were to have another COVID-like event where all of a sudden the burden was put on our network infrastructure in unprecedented way, or maybe only precedent by COVID, with increased demand and increased needs and usage. It may not, hold as well as it did prior because those needs would be greater. So I wouldn't say that I'm doom and gloom, but if this does not get repealed, I do think that we will generally see a rate of increase in at a slower than we haven't before in terms of bandwidth, in terms of possibility, price, access, all those kinds of positive attributes. I think that will decrease at least in the rate. It's hard to say whether or not we'll see an overall quality dip just because there is still somewhat of a market, and it's a big sector, obviously. So there is incentive for people to invest and create and innovate. It just will be greatly stifled from where it currently sits.
All right. I couldn't agree more. Donald, tell everyone where they can go to keep up with your work, follow you. Maybe you got a Twitter or something like that. Where can they go to follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow all of my work at KimballDonald.com or follow me directly on Twitter or X, as you please, at KimballDonald. Can we all
someday we all need to decide if we're going to call it X or Twitter? I don't know where you stand on this. Actually, we should have done a whole episode about whether or not we should say Twitter or X. Where do you come down on this?
I'm actually very much a fan of Twitter. I think the brand, I think that's the biggest mistake Elon made was getting rid of the branding there, because that was one of its strongest assets. So I'll continue to say Twitter because I think that's the cultural vernacular that we're used to.
We had a listener on our podcast that said the rule is you should keep saying Twitter until people look at you like you're an idiot when you say Twitter. And as long as everyone understands what you're saying and no one thinks twice about it, then we'll just keep saying Twitter. I agree. It's one of the worst things he ever did. When your company name is a verb also that you tweet people, it's just not a good thing to do. Come on, Elon. All right, man. Thank you so much for your time today. Really great conversation. And we would love to have you back on again in the future.
Oh, it would be a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thanks so much to Donald Kimball for coming on and talking about net neutrality. Guess what's coming up next, though? That's Dumb Bleep of the Week. That is the day of the week where we count down the dumbest things that happened in politics. This one's a little different because I just got back from a vacation to Peru, and, Charlie not going to be here for the actual Dumb Bleep of the Week. And so it's a little bit different from normal, but we do still have 11 dumbs that we're going to be going through and letting the live group, the Fed Haters Club, vote on which one of them is the dumbest. So if you want to get involved in that, you want to go to join GML for goodmorningliberty.com. We'll be right back with the dumb bleep of the week.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone. The first UN worker killed in Gaza has been identified as an Indian national. 46-year-old Webhav Anil Kale was killed in Gaza when the vehicle he was travelling in came under attack in Rafah. Jody Jacobs reports from the UN headquarters in New York.
A former Indian Army officer, Webhav Anil Kale, became the first international casualty for the world body since the Israel-Hamas conflict started last year. Colonel Kale reportedly took premature retirement from the Indian Army back in 2022 and joined the UN as a security coordination officer in the Department of Safety and Security just 2 months ago. He was traveling with another security staffer to the European hospital in Rafah when their clearly marked UN vehicle was struck on Monday morning. The UN Secretary General has condemned the attack, calling for a full investigation. Close to 190 UN personnel have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. Most of them, according to the UN, are national staff working for UNRWA. Jody Jacobs, New York.
8 people have been killed and dozens more injured in a bus crash in Florida. Highway Patrol said there were more than 50, quote, migrant workers on board when the bus went off the road early on Tuesday morning. Tony Waterman has more.
According to the Florida Highway Patrol, the bus and a pickup truck sideswiped each other near Gainesville around 6:30 in the morning. The bus veered off the road and went through a fence before overturning. Besides those killed, at least 8 others are critically injured, and officials say dozens more have non-life-threatening injuries. Highway Patrol says the bus was transporting farm workers to a local watermelon farm. They are investigating the cause of the crash. Tony Waterman, Texas.
Donald Trump's one-time lawyer Michael Cohen is being cross-examined on the stand at his ex-boss's criminal trial in New York. Cohen says he was responsible for paying $130,000 in return for a porn star's silence. Prosecutors allege that it was done on behalf of Trump and that he falsified business records to cover up an affair with Stormy Daniels. Benji Hire reports from outside the courthouse in Manhattan.
Michael Cohen, Trump's fixer-turned-foe, was asked by lawyers, why did you pay that sum of money, $130,000, to Stormy Daniels? He replied, quote, to ensure the story would not come out, would not affect Mr. Trump's chances of becoming president of the United States. He laid out his accounts of events, which effectively imply that Donald Trump personally greenlit this plan in order to avoid it derailing his presidential campaign. That's inside the court. Outside, Speaker of the House of Representatives Mike Johnson, the third most senior politician in this country, claimed that Donald Trump is innocent of these charges. It's not about justice, he says, it's all about politics.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
All right, what's up, all of our liberty-loving friends? This is another fantastic episode of Liberty at Night with Nate and Charlie on the Free Talk Live Network, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee, and Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. With fees of less than a penny per transaction, Dash is made for spending. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Mayor protocol and in multi-crypto wallets. Thanks to Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month for this sponsorship. It's easy to get and use Dash. You can learn more at dash.org. That is dash.org. Well, this does start Dumb Bleep of the Week. This is the first segment. I did want to tell you beforehand, you know our podcast. I tell you guys about it all the time. Good Morning Liberty. You can find us on your favorite podcast app, Good Morning Liberty, or you can go to bernielies.com in your browser. I was gone last week. You might have noticed if you listened on Tuesdays that there wasn't a new show last week. That's because I was in Peru. And it was my first time going to Peru. It was a really good time. By the way, I would recommend it to anyone. I've been to 15 countries before this, and this was the most amazing vacation I've ever been on. The sights that I saw when I was in Peru, Machu Picchu, things like that. You're never going to see anything like this. So I do want to recommend that. Okay. But, that does mean that the Dumb Bleep is going to be a little bit delayed. Some of the things happened while I was gone, all that stuff. Charlie's not here for this episode because he's also traveling for business. It's a little bit different from normal. If you want to hear our normal thing, go to Good Morning Liberty on your favorite podcast app. And you can go to bernielies.com in your browser. You can go to joingmail.com if you want to join the Fed Haters Club. GodHatesFeds.com if you want a shirt. You know the thing. So it's Dumb Bleep of the Week. We have 11 submissions. And some of these happened like right when I left to go on the trip. So they might seem kind of old to you, but we didn't get to talk about them. And I guess they're still relevant. So we got a couple things that might be, a couple weeks old or whatever. And then we'll get into some more recent things that have been happening. One of the older things we'll talk about is what Ron DeSantis did down there in Florida a little bit after I left on my vacation. And I know he'd been signaling that he was going to do this, but I just wanted to point out that it's okay to be against something or think that something is ridiculous or think that there's some type of a global conspiracy to end the agriculture market as we see it and control people and control their food and all that. You can believe all those things and still think that it's really dumb to ban the manufacture and sale of lab-grown meat in a state in the United States. I hope that as libertarians, if you're a libertarian listening to this right now, you would apply, I don't know, maybe the same ideas you have about, you could even say drugs. Like drugs are bad, right? Can we agree drugs are bad? A lot of drugs are bad, but we think people should be able to put whatever they want in their own bodies as long as they're not hurting anyone else. Okay, it's up to you to decide what you're going to do. I don't know. Let's listen to this news clip about Ron DeSantis banning fake meat.
This mouth-watering sizzle and sear is more science to stomach than farm to table, and that's why it won't be happening in Florida.
Take your fake lab-grown meat elsewhere. We're not doing that in the state of Florida.
That's the message behind the bill Governor DeSantis signed Wednesday. It takes aim at meat grown by scientists in a lab, making it a crime to manufacture or sell cultivated meat in Florida.
What they want to say is this is the same as raising cattle and doing it naturally, then there's no reason that you have this industry. So it is designed to represent a threat to agriculture as we know it.
And supporters say the new law offers protections to Florida's cattle industry.
It's never been more important than today to protect Florida's farmers and ranchers, and that's what this legislation does.
But opponents say concerns about lab-grown meat are overblown. Federal regulators have already said some products are safe and ready to eat after receiving FDA approval last year, a point made by cultivated meat industry members during the legislative session.
Cultivated meat is safe.
All right, so when it comes to it being safe and all that, we make so many arguments about how the free market is going to decide these kind of things. And situations like this get really kind of cloudy because that it's never really a completely free market deciding these things. Like the government might make rules and regulations that are going to artificially drive demand towards these products. Or they might make rules and regulations that make real meat, real cattle and agriculture and all that. They might make those things more expensive than they otherwise would be. And they do make those things more expensive than they otherwise would be. So is that really a free market? What you want to do is make sure that you have a free market for these products. And I hate that I have to explain this in a way where I'm talking to Republicans or even sometimes to libertarians. It doesn't matter if you don't like lab-grown meat or if you don't like some of the reasons that some people want to have lab-grown meat. You could probably name 1,000 different products out there that you don't. Should we ban solar panels? I don't know. They're going to try and force people to go to solar panels instead of using coal or natural gas or nuclear or whatever. So maybe we should ban the manufacture and sale of solar panels. Then you talk about how you're going to ban it because you're going to protect an industry. Well, I don't want to protect any industries from innovation and technology. Now, lab-grown meat is kind of weird to me. I'm not going to be jumping in line for it or anything. I do have maybe a little bit of a different view on this because my wife is a vegetarian and we're often looking for things like Beyond Meat and Morningstar Farms things and all those alternatives to meat so she can put something on the grill like I'm putting something on the grill. And so she likes that as well. Now, I don't think that's exactly why people are pushing lab-grown meat. They're doing it because they want to get rid of the cow farts, right? We all know that. It's all the climate change thing. That's why they're pushing towards this. Let the free market decide. And by let the free market decide, I mean let the actual free market decide. Don't subsidize either one of these industries. Don't overregulate either one of these industries. And let the actual people who are buying these products decide which one they like most. If they decide they like lab-grown meat more, maybe they don't like the idea of cows getting slaughtered or pigs getting slaughtered or whatever. I can understand that part. If they're doing it because they think it's somehow better for the environment and they want to pay more money for this stuff, okay, that's fine. And other people want to pay for the cows. Okay, that's fine. Why do we have this small government, liberty-loving governor out there trying to ban the manufacture and sale of a product? And why are there so many Republicans getting behind this? It's a really weird thing to me, and that's why it's Dumb Bleep number 1 for Dumb Bleep of the Week. All right, let's get on to Dumb Bleep number 2. Gavin Newsom. He's going to be a presidential candidate pretty soon. I think we all know that. He might even end up being the president someday, which is really scary. He's one of the fakest people I've ever seen in my entire life. He's like an AI chat GPT politician. Like you put all of the politician things that you've seen from TV shows and from history and you uploaded them into someone's brain. And he makes all those gestures and the movements and the facial expressions and the proper pauses. Now, here and there, he does all that proper stuff. And people, I guess, like that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how people fall for that, but they've been falling for politicians for a long time. So I guess that's why. Someone asked him how they went from a $100 billion surplus to such a significant deficit in just a few years. And his answer, yes, was climate change. It was climate change. That's why they went from this. Here you go, Dumb Bleep number 2.
Can we explain to Californians how we moved from a $100 billion surplus to such a significant deficit in just a matter of a few years?
Well, it's, we can explain it. $349 billion of unprecedented capital gains, 11.6%, when traditional capital gains is around 5.18% on average. It's almost double. So you had massive volatility. You have requirements under Prop 2, the GAN. You have requirements under Prop 98, which require that set aside. We use 93% of our surplus, which is, I want to be careful, either on the higher end or without precedent for one-time purposes. So we anticipated, because we didn't want that surplus to go to ongoing commitments, we anticipated that shortfall. What we didn't anticipate is these rain bombs in December, January, February, and March, these atmospheric rivers that led to a federal declaration that led to FEMA and the IRS moving in a direction where we couldn't collect our taxes until, I believe, November 16th, with their estimates because there were other states that had similar delays in their taxes related to weather events. If there was any indication that climate change has impacts well beyond those that are often promoted, I would consider our financial delays as just another example of why we need to tackle them. Another reason I'm looking forward to conversation.
I've got another idea for him. Maybe it was climate change. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe California's just never had the weather that they've had here in the last couple of years or so. Or maybe, first off, the $100 billion surplus was fake. That was a real surplus. I'm not saying it wasn't a real surplus for the state of California. He alluded to this. They got massive gains from capital gains taxes. That was a really big one because of the big boom that happened after COVID. Another big thing that happened for the state of California was things like unemployment insurance benefits. Here's a big one from one of California's government websites. The state paid out $4.9 billion in unemployment insurance benefits in 2019, but in 2020, thanks to infusions of federal cash, the total jumped to $106 billion, and then another $70 billion in 2021. Those are taxable payouts, by the way, going out to unemployment insurance for people, and a lot of times people end up paying taxes on that would have ended up not paying taxes otherwise. And so they received a lot of money from the federal government. And then they also decided that this was going to keep happening somehow. They decided that they were going to stay somewhere around this income that was coming in, and they decided they were going to spend a bunch of money afterwards. And then all of this stuff dried up. The market went back to a normal situation. The unemployment insurance went back to a normal situation, and people stopped making as much money because of inflation. The businesses stopped making as much money, tech businesses in California, less investment in California, and they ended up with massive deficits. Or it was climate change that did it. It was maybe one of those two things. I'm not sure. Never met a situation that couldn't be blamed on climate change, even just bad fiscal policy, I guess. Speaking of taxes, let's talk about this direct file. This one came from the group. Thanks for whoever it is that posted this. We got a nice video from More Perfect Union about that direct file thing. You see Elizabeth Warren posted about that all the time. Direct file is where they let some people do a direct file with their taxes directly through the IRS for free. Didn't charge them anything. Okay, that's great. And it gave people so many refunds, $90 million in refunds from direct file. It's just a money giving away opportunity here from IRS direct file. Let's listen to this guy talk about just how great this program was. We'll talk about why it's weird to hear people mention just how great these things are and the tax returns and all that after we watch this video.
Pilot program launched this year by the IRS called Direct File. The program empowered working class taxpayers to file their taxes directly with the government without paying corporate giants like TurboTax or H&R Block. The new program has already helped save working class people $90 million in refunds and an estimated $5.6 million in tax preparation fees.
All right, first off, I just have to stop here. This program that allowed you to file your taxes directly, working class, this is More Perfect Union, working class people filing their taxes. This new program helped save taxpayers $90 million in refunds. That is not a saving. Now, maybe some of those people got back more money than they paid in. There's a few weird things going on here. One, I would take it that we're assuming that these people wouldn't have gotten the $90 million in refunds if they wouldn't have used something like TurboTax to file their federal taxes, or H&R Block, or Free Tax USA. But this direct file helped people save money. They helped $90 million worth of savings by giving people refunds on money that the government had already taken from them against their will. Just want to make sure we're keeping our heads straight while we're listening to this.
Over 140,000 taxpayers used the service this year, far surpassing Treasury's goal of 100,000 users, with an overwhelming majority reporting a high degree of user satisfaction. Thanks to funding from the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRS has simplified the tax filing process and set a new standard for how the government develops technology. So, why direct file? Well, for far too long, the tax filing system hasn't worked for taxpayers. All of us collectively spend 1.7 billion hours, or $31 billion annually, just to file our taxes, even though the overwhelming majority have pretty simple returns and should be able to file in mere minutes and for free. The problem is...
Now, the stats he just laid out there, you're not actually comparing the same thing. He says we collectively spend 1.7 billion hours filing our taxes, and then they say, but the overwhelming majority have pretty simple taxes. Well, how much time did those people spend filing their taxes? You just compared everyone, which includes like how long it took Elon Musk to do his taxes, which is probably a span of a couple months of a whole floor of a building of people working on something like that, to like in the same group as me, who filed my taxes in about an hour on a website, and it didn't cost me any money, by the way. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Let's go.
The nation's largest tax prep companies want you to pay to file. And so they've spent millions lobbying to maintain a broken filing process. They've even tricked taxpayers into thinking they can file for free, but then charge them for filing anyway. This tax filing season, the IRS launched Direct File with a pilot in 12 states, relying on an iterative process that's similar to how a private company would beta test a new tech product. They offered a mobile-first tool in both English and Spanish, and robust bilingual customer support. The Direct File pilot was a test, and the IRS passed with flying colors.
Isn't that just amazing? The IRS, I mean, let's give them a hand. The IRS, that's a really great job. They collect all those trillions of dollars, and they were able to make a website that is similar to other websites that we've all been using our entire lives to file our taxes. And they were able to do this with probably just a few $1 billion of your money for free, and let 140,000 people file their simple tax returns. I just want to make sure that they get a round of applause for this, and they gave themselves all green dots here. Good job for them. I don't want to forget the fact that while we're talking about how it's bad that people charge you fees to file your taxes, the taxes are a fee that everyone is charged that pays taxes, and that's the thing that we should be talking about. I don't know how many billions of dollars these tax companies rake in, but it's nothing compared to the trillions of dollars that the government rakes in through force every year. And then there's the one other really simple thing that I want to say about this, which is that IRS Direct File is for filing your federal taxes. And they're talking about it being for people who have simple tax returns. You could do it on mobile or whatever. And I want to know who didn't already know that there are numerous free websites for filing your federal tax. Keep in mind, if you live in a state that has state taxes and you did IRS Direct File, you still did IRS Direct File, and then you went to another company and you paid them to file your state taxes. I want to know which of these people didn't know that you could file your federal taxes for free, and then they would charge you for your state taxes, because that's what they do. That's what most of these websites do. And if you're like me, who lives in Tennessee and has pretty simple tax returns, you go to Free Tax USA, you file your taxes. It costs you no money except for the money the government steals from you when you file your taxes. That costs money. And then they file it for you, and then they say, hey, you got state taxes to file? It'll be $90 to file that. I'm like, no, I live in Tennessee. And they're like, cool, you're done. That's great. So it's free. But they're introducing this to you as some revolutionary tool. And congrats to the IRS that they were able to make a website that already exists in 20 different variations on the internet, where you're able to file your federal taxes, your simple federal tax filing for free, as if that's something that didn't already exist, and as if they didn't spend billions of your dollars to do this whole thing. Great job for them. That's dumb bleep number 3. IRS direct file. How about number 4? Kathy Hochul and the soft bigotry of low expectations. She's given a great interview right here, and I don't know why these people never get in trouble for saying stuff like this, but it sounds to me like it's kind of racist when they say things like this, but I don't know. You be the judge of that. Here's Kathy Hochul, governor of the great state of New York.
Researchers in New York, college students will attract more federal grants, and this is how we lay down the mark. No state has done this. And in fact, I talked to a lot of other people, said, I wish my governor had thought of that first. I said, no, this is New York. We like to be first, with all due respect to people from other states. It's sort of our attitude. We will be the best, we will be the first, and I want others to follow, because right now we have, young black kids growing up in the Bronx who don't even know what the word a computer is. They don't know. They don't know these things. And I want the world open up to all of them, because when you have their diverse voices innovating solutions through technology, then you're really addressing society's broader challenges. So now
I'm just spitballing here, but I feel like if anyone who was on the right said something like this, a young black kid in the Bronx doesn't even know what the word computer is. Imagine Nick Fuentes came out and said that black kids don't even know what a computer. They're so dumb. They are so dumb. They don't even know what a computer is. It's 2024, and here you go. These black kids in the Bronx don't even know what the heck a computer is. The thing that we all use somehow on a almost daily basis. You go to school, they give you a freaking computer to use while you're in there. They're all over the place. We had computers when I was in school back in 94. We were playing Oregon Trail or something, or whatever it is, on a computer. But these poor black kids, they just don't even know what that is. T-Dub said the Amish know what computers are. They ride into town to use a computer every now and then, okay? They know what one is. But if you're a Democrat and you're a Democrat politician and you're somehow trying to pander to certain people, and there's a black interviewer here, and you're able to say that black children don't know, I don't know, guys. I don't know. So that's number 4, Kathy Hochul. Very, very soft bigotry of low expectations, or it's just really hard bigotry and just outright blatant racism. I guess it depends on the person that's saying it. Number 5, let's go to another dumb lady here, Hillary Clinton. Don't worry, not only do black kids not know what computers are, but young people don't know what information is, and they don't know how to interpret it. They just can't figure it out. They get this information in front of them. They're like, I don't know. There's no way I could do this. They need someone like Hillary Clinton or some people who are friends with her to tell them about information, because why is she still here? Does anyone know why she's still here at all? No one likes you. It's clear no one likes you. You were someone's wife. You're most famous for being someone's wife. Okay, and then you walked into a political position for a minute, and then you tried to get into a position of power, and no one liked you. They kept telling you they didn't like you, and they told you over and over again, you're one of the most hated people in America. You're up towards the top of the most hated people in America, and you're still out here talking to people right now. And why are we talking about Hillary Clinton right now? That's because she's about to give us all some really terrible advice and make a bunch of really stupid statements about things, and how young people can't tell the difference between good information and bad information, and how TikTok is rotting everyone's brains, not because it's given us terrible cultural trends, but because it's given us bad foreign policy advice, stuff like that. It'd be better if we just had the U.S. government controlling this app, like they control most of the other social media companies. All that and more to come. Liberty Night with Nate and Charlie on the Free Talk Live Network.
Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 13th through the 16th for the 8th annual Fork Fest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Forkfest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which has sold out in recent years. Forkfest happens the weekend before the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Forkfest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 13th through the 16th. You can find out more at the unofficial website, forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the Forkfest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the Forkfest forum. You can find links to those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there June 13th through the 16th. Forkfest.party. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
The latest episode of Free Talk Live continues with Hour 3 up next after the news here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone. The first UN worker killed in Gaza has been identified as an Indian national. 46-year-old Webhav Anil Kale was killed in Gaza when the vehicle he was travelling in came under attack in Rafah. Jody Jacobs reports from the UN headquarters in New York.
A former Indian Army officer, Webhav Anil Kale, became the first international casualty for the world body since the Israel-Hamas conflict started last year. Colonel Kale reportedly took premature retirement from the Indian Army back in 2022 and joined the UN as a security coordination officer in the Department of Safety and Security just 2 months ago. He was traveling with another security staffer to the European hospital in Rafah when their clearly marked UN vehicle was struck on Monday morning. The UN Secretary-General has condemned the attack, calling for a full investigation. Close to 190 UN personnel have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. Most of them, according to the UN, are national staff working for UNRWA. Jody Jacobs, New York.
8 people have been killed and dozens more injured in a bus crash in Florida. Highway Patrol said there were more than 50, quote, migrant workers on board when the bus went off the road early on Tuesday morning. Tony Waterman has more.
According to the Florida Highway Patrol, the bus and a pickup truck sideswiped each other near Gainesville around 6:30 in the morning. The bus veered off the road and went through a fence before overturning. Besides those killed, at least 8 others are critically injured, and officials say dozens more have non-life-threatening injuries. Highway Patrol says the bus was transporting farm workers to a local watermelon farm. They are investigating the cause of the crash. Tony Waterman, Texas.
Donald Trump's one-time lawyer Michael Cohen is being cross-examined on the stand at his ex-boss's criminal trial in New York. Cohen says he was responsible for paying $130,000 in return for a porn star's silence. Benji Heyer reports from outside the courthouse in Manhattan.
Michael Cohen, Trump's fixer-turned-foe, was asked by lawyers, why did you pay that sum of money, $130,000, to Stormy Daniels? He replied, quote, to ensure the story would not come out, would not affect Mr. Trump's chances of becoming president of the United States. He laid out his accounts of events, which effectively imply that Donald Trump personally greenlit this plan in order to avoid it derailing his presidential campaign. That's inside the court. Outside, Speaker of the House of Representatives Mike Johnson, the third most senior politician in this country, claimed that Donald Trump is innocent of these charges. It's not about justice, he says, it's all about politics.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more detail today at the civil unrest in Georgia, where riot police have taken on protesters demonstrating against a new foreign agents law passed by the country's parliament. The law, backed by Moscow, requires organizations to register as foreign agents if more than 20% of their funding comes from outside Georgia. It's similar to laws that have been used in Moscow to silence Kremlin critics. Anne McElvoy, executive editor of Politico Europe, says the law has become a lightning rod for Georgians who fear that Vladimir Putin has territorial aspirations towards their country.
There's always been an independent streak to Georgians, and even in the Soviet period, they were a bit more freewheeling. This attempt to impose very Putin-style law, which basically says that if you have any contacts or receive any funding for your organization from outside the country, then you're a foreign agent. This just has the smell of a kind of Putin-style attempt to clamp down on anything outside the control of those who want to keep control of what happens inside Georgia.
Opposition parties in Georgia say one byproduct of the law is that it will damage Georgia's efforts to join the European Union. Protesters on the streets of Tbilisi say the government's move to pass the law is a direct capitulation to pressure from the Kremlin. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again. A United Nations staffer killed in Gaza has been identified as an Indian national who was travelling in a vehicle that came under attack. A bus crash has killed 8 people in the US state of Florida. Highway Patrol said there were more than 50, quote, migrant workers on board. And Michael Cohen is being cross-examined in the criminal trial against his former boss, Donald Trump, who is accused of falsifying business records. There's more from us on Twitter at Feature Story. And that's the latest from Feature Story News. Caroline Malone reporting.
While getting drinks after work with a group of co-workers, local shipping clerk Russell Chambliss told reporters Wednesday night he was unsure whether he was bonding with his male associates or being mercilessly bullied by them.
I'm pretty sure that Bill called me limp dick earlier, and Todd keeps punching me in the shoulder. Pretty hard, too. I can't tell if it's their way of letting me feel like I'm part of the group or making me feel bad about myself.
Chambliss said while his coworkers verbally demeaned him and even made him feel physically threatened at various points in the evening, they did so with large smiles on their faces, making it extremely unclear if his coworkers enjoyed his company or wanted him to leave the bar.
Well, I told Jeff about this problem that I was having with my girlfriend, and he called me a pussy and then walked away. But then, like 5 minutes later, he came back with a beer that he had bought for me. What does that even mean? Apparently I'm invited over to Todd's house for dinner this weekend. I guess that'll be fun.
For more on this story, keep checking theonion.com.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
All right, what's up, y'all? We are back. Liberty at Night with Nate and Charlie on the Free Talk Live Network. We are in the middle, or kind of the beginning of Dumb Bleep of the week. I was telling you before the break that we unfortunately have to hear from America's most hated politician, Hillary Clinton. Here she is.
I want to emphasize, though, is propaganda is not education. Propaganda, on whether it's TikTok or in the classroom, is actually the opposite of education. Anybody who is teaching in a university or anyone who is putting content on social media should be held responsible for what they include and what they exclude. And so much of what we're seeing, particularly on TikTok, about what's going on in the Middle East is woefully false, but it's also incredibly slanted, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel. And it is, not any place where anyone should go to get information about complex matters like what is going on there. So we have to do a much better job in trying to, number one, teach history at all levels. That's why I love SUFS, because it's about our history. It's a part of history we didn't all study and learn about. But it's also important that we recognize the propaganda value of social media. People are on social media oftentimes to press an agenda, an ideological, a religious, a financial, a political, a partisan agenda. And so, of course, you don't get the facts. Of course, you don't get any kind of context. And we have to do a better job ourselves, and we certainly have to do a better job with young people in trying to help them understand how to filter and interpret the information they're giving. And I think we also need to do a better job in our classrooms, particularly at the college and university level, not to fall into, easy absolutes. You're either this or you're that. You're for, you're against. Life is too complicated. History certainly is. So I agree that we've got to do something to, stand against a lot of these false narratives. And with respect to my dear friend, Madeleine Albright, she deserves to have anything and everything named for her.
Yes. Yeah, Madeleine, it was worth it. Albright, just a little icing on the cake there, little sprinkles for you there at the end of it. It's also crazy to me that here she is on Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough on MSNBC, and they're talking about this binary thinking that people have. You're with us or against us. It's either this or it's that, and life is just more complicated than that. Who is she talking to? She's on MSNBC right now. All we get is this binary think from MSNBC. You're either for democracy or you're against it. You're either for Ukraine or you're for Putin. It's wild to me that these people can get up in front of an audience, much smaller audience, than they used to have, and say these things and not just get laughed off of the TV. And maybe, I guess they do get laughed off of the TV because people aren't watching. But the fact that she'll go up there and say these kind of things to Scarborough, and then you can't get your information from TikTok. It's heavily slanted. I'm assuming she'd probably say the same thing about where does she want you to get your education? From MSNBC? From CNN? From the government? Listen to whatever the government puts out? Was that hold true for when Trump's in the government too? Like, where are people supposed to go for their information? Just the legacy media, but not Fox News? I don't know. I have no idea what she's saying. And I don't know why people still talk to her. I don't know why people are still listening to her, why we pretend like we take her seriously. The American people don't like her. They chose Trump over her. They chose Obama over her. No, I don't care. I don't care what she has to say. No one else should either. That's Dumb Bleep number 5. I wanted to talk about this too because it recently came out that CISA and the FBI are resuming talks with social media companies over disinformation removal. That's coming from the Senate Intel chair, Mark Warner. He told reporters in a briefing at the RSA conference that agencies restarted talks with social media companies as the Supreme Court heard arguments in that Murthy versus Missouri case. That was the one that said that they couldn't talk to any of these companies. And then once it got in front of the Supreme Court was actually very sympathetic to the government's position. And around that time, guess who restarted talking to these companies and talking to them about removing disinformation from online? And by the way, it's all so they can protect the integrity of the election. They're very worried about the integrity of the upcoming 2024 election. Biden's administration and departments and agencies are very, very worried about the integrity of the 2024 election. And so Biden's administration is restarting talks with social media companies about removing what they deem to be disinformation from social media. So it's just starting back up again. And luckily we have someone like Musk who has X. If they do reach out to him, he'll probably let us know, but they're probably not even going to try with him. I don't think we're going to get the same files when it comes to Facebook and Instagram. And of course, it's one of the reasons why they want to have control over TikTok. She's talking about TikTok and how it's a bad place to get information. Well, why don't we have it owned by a U.S. company then? And then we can talk directly with that U.S. company and have them remove information that we don't like. It's all clear as day, folks. It doesn't even need that much explaining that's exactly what they're doing. Let's move on to number 6. Judy Chu, representative. Oh, I love it when people make really, really terrible, stupid arguments. And then especially when it comes to something like women's health protection, which by the way is abortion. You got this sign here, says hands off our Home Appliances Act, but they crossed out home appliances and put our bodies. And so it reads hands off our Our Bodies Act, and that's what she's talking about. This tweet reads, toasters, microwaves, and coffee makers shouldn't have more rights than American women. But MAGA Republicans' priority this week is passing a Hands Off Our Home Appliances Act. This is a really annoying argument that I hear a lot of people make. They say it about guns too. Guns shouldn't have more right than women. I'll play the video of her talking about this, but I guess I'll make one of the points first off. It's not the gun that has the rights. It's the human being that has the right to have the gun. So if you say people can have guns, you're not giving guns rights. You're protecting people's rights. And if you say people should have the home appliances that they want, whether or not they're gas stoves or not, you're not saying that the gas stoves have more rights than other people do. You're saying that people have the right to have the gas stoves or whatever home appliances it is that they want. That is the argument that you're making. You're not drawing up rights for gas stoves to exist, and gas stoves are now protected under the Constitution as the protected class of mechanical tools. I don't know. It's ridiculous. Okay, let's go to Judy True. Where's she at? There she is. This should be good. And here we go.
Mr. Speaker, the legislation this body brings to the floor each week speaks volumes about our priorities. White House Democrats are defending our fundamental freedoms by fighting back against extreme MAGA Republican attacks on abortion care and fertility services like IVF. The majority believes that rather than protecting the rights of women in this country, it's essential that we protect the so-called rights of home appliances. The difference could not be starker. In a time of unrelenting attacks on reproductive rights, when 21 states have bans that either fully or partially ban abortion access, House Republicans have chosen to do nothing. They've chosen to pretend that women are not dying, that they are not being forced to carry unwanted pregnancies. They are doing nothing to protect IVF or birth control. Instead, they are bringing up a rule today to consider legislation to protect home appliances.
All right, they're not protecting home appliances. They're protecting the rights of women to make my sandwich on a gas stove. Why is that so hard to understand? Okay, the rights of women to use whatever dishwasher they want to use to clean my dishes. Okay, that is what these are women's rights. They are protecting them for everyone. All right. It's not for the actual appliance itself. It's for the woman that's going to use the appliance and the refrigerator that she wants to store my food in before she cooks it. If you guys knew my actual home life situation, you would know how much I'm joking right now, because I mentioned earlier my wife's a vegetarian. We've been together for 14 years and we eat completely separately. She makes her food, I make my food, and that's it. Okay, so if you actually knew the way that my life was, you would know how much of a joke this is to me. But I don't like it when people use disingenuous arguments. This is completely ridiculous. You could make an argument. You could say, well, women are dying because of some of these abortion restrictions or something like that, or the IVF restrictions were ridiculous in Alabama there for the 2 weeks that they were there in Alabama. And you could make those arguments if you want. But I don't like making it more than what it actually is. And I don't like acting like this isn't a very complicated argument. I'm not going to get into abortion right now, even though it's always a really fun conversation. But there are genuine arguments on both sides. You know, there is a side that truly thinks that an abortion is a murder and the taking of a human life. And there is a side that doesn't care about murdering babies. So there are genuine arguments on both sides. You know, why can't we just accept that? All right, let's move on to the next one, which is Dumb Bleep number 7. Thank God we finally get to talk about Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna. This is something that happened right around the time that I left to go on my trip, but we haven't been able to talk about it yet. They unveiled a bill to cancel all medical debt. They have declared that the medical debt will be canceled if they just can get this bill to be passed. The number is weird to me. One of the first, it's $220 billion. Now, if I were to ask you, given all of the talk that we hear about medical debt in the U.S. and how big of an issue this is, if I were to ask you how much medical debt you think there was in the country, I don't think you would say $220 billion. Maybe you would, but that's not what I would have guessed. The actual number is a lot higher. I think this comes to them canceling debt that is actually held with hospital corporations that are fronting this credit to people that are getting paid back to them. Not so much like if you take a medical bill and you put it on your credit card and now you're paying on your credit card this medical bill that you have. I don't think that's included in this because the other numbers I've seen is something more like $1 trillion or a little bit more than $1 trillion in medical bills or medical debt that people are paying. But whatever, they want to do $220 billion held by Americans across the country. The bill introduced by all these different people, all Democrats, proposes canceling all existing medical debt, removing it from credit reports, and dramatically restricting the accrual of any future medical debt. Well, that's not going to have any effect on medical treatment that people get. I bet you're just not going to be able to get medical debt. It's not that you won't be able to get medical treatment. It just won't come with the debt. Quote, "This is the United States of America, the richest country in the history of the world. People in our country should not be going bankrupt because they got cancer and could not afford to pay their medical bills," Sanders said in the press release. "The time has come to cancel all medical debt and guarantee health care to all as a human right, not a privilege. You cannot have a right to a product or service that has to be provided to you by another person." Just an announcement for everyone. PSA, public service announcement for everyone. You don't have a right, a human right to the service of another human. And so that would be slavery. There were people in America's history that thought that they had a right to the services of other human beings. And they were wrong about that. If enacted, Sanders' Medical Debt Cancellation Act would create a federal grant program to cancel all existing medical debt, prioritizing low-resource providers and vulnerable populations. Cancellation is kind of a weird word. Same kind of word we use for student debt cancellation. By cancellation, what they mean is they're going to take a bunch of money from everyone, including you, and then they're going to put it towards these bills to cancel the bills, but they're going to use your money to do it. And they're going to use money they take from other people too. And that's going to have effects on the economy, but somehow it's not going to affect you at all. I don't know. I don't know how that works. You'll have to explain that to me. The bill further proposes amending the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act to prevent creditors from collecting past medical bills and the Consumer Credit Reporting Act to block credit agencies from reporting information related to unpaid medical bills. Great. That's awesome. That's not going to work at all, but let's keep going. Sanders wants to update billing and debt collection requirements for medical providers as well to reduce the likelihood of any future debt to be incurred. Okay, what if they can't pay for the medical services? How are you going to not have any debt if you can't pay for it? You need them to front something for you. I don't know. Quote, "No one in America should face financial ruin because of the outrageous cost of an unexpected medical emergency or a hospital stay." Super annoying part about this, the same conversation we have when we talk about student loan debt cancellation, is that it does absolutely nothing to affect the underlying cause of the problem. The underlying cause of the problem is the cost, in this case, of medical care in the United States, something the government has ballooned, had a big helping hand in ballooning, especially since the 60s and 70s, especially since everyone got covered by insurance or everyone got Medicare when they got into their, everything got more expensive once the government started putting money towards this, and once everyone started having insurance to pay for everything, things ballooned up. It's something we used to talk about a lot on this show. You can go back to like episode 100, and we're probably going into detail about medical expenses and what we could actually do to lower those. We should probably talk more about that sometime, I think. I maybe you've heard me talk about this before, but I'm going to show you this. How about auto loan balances? $1.61 trillion in Q4 of 2023. $1.61 trillion in auto loan debt. That's more than medical debt. Why don't we cancel that? Well, in fact, I bet you if we were to cancel medical debt, it wouldn't be too long before we talked about why stop there? If we can just cancel that debt, why don't we no one should go bankrupt. You have to have a car to go to work. How are you going to go to work to pay your bills that you shouldn't have if you don't have a car? And so you shouldn't be pushing the bankruptcy because you bought that Hummer that you shouldn't have, Everyone should be able to buy a $70,000 vehicle and still be able to put food on the table, And auto debt is balloon. Well, sure, we started forcing people to buy EVs that are way more expensive than regular cars, and we put all the cheaper cars, took them off the market. But yeah, we're going to cancel the auto loan debt. What about homes? You got to have a home. There's $12 trillion in mortgage debt. Q4 of 2023, that was the most recent number. Why don't we just come in and cancel that too? It's not your fault that you had to have a house where you're supposed to be homeless. I don't know why people don't. It's a human right to have some form of shelter. Just get whatever size house you want, even if you can't afford it. And maybe you should have stayed in an apartment or something like that, or lived in a cheaper town in a trailer or something like that. No, you had to get a house for sure. We should probably cancel that. And then when it comes to medical debt, I have this issue. You look at mortgage debt, and maybe in the back of your mind, you might say, well, okay, there's a lot of mortgage debt, but there's a lot of assets out there. There's probably more home value, than that $12 trillion in mortgage debt. And so, yeah, maybe we cancel some of these others, but not mortgage debt, because those are people buying assets that are going to help towards their retirements and stuff like that. So there's this weird thing with medical debt where people don't see themselves still being alive as an asset that they just paid for. And if you've been listening for a while, you've heard me talk about this before, but we've got a lot of new people listening to the show right now, thanks to our X ads that have reached, like 13 million people so far while I was gone in Peru. And some of those people have come to listen to the show. 4 years ago, I had appendicitis. I had an appendectomy, emergency. It was very painful. I went in and got that sucker taken out. It was about to burst. Pretty. It was like, Lord have mercy, I'm about to bust. And then they went in there and they took that thing out. And it cost me $2,000 is what it cost me out of pocket. And that's a lot of money. We got that bill for it. And I remember where I was when I said this to my wife. I said, $2,000. That is ridiculous. That's insane. It sucks. That sucks. We were going to buy a new sofa that year. And instead, we had to pay these stupid doctors to keep me alive. And now I'm still here. What a waste. What a waste. I wish we could have bought that sofa. Now, and then it hit me when we were talking about that. That was actually one of the best expenses I have ever paid for in my entire life. Actually, it was the best expense I've ever paid for in my entire life. It was more important than my phone. It was more important than my car or my house because I'm still alive. It was the biggest asset I have ever purchased, and I paid $2,000 for it. It was the best asset. It was the best return on investment I've ever made. I should start a website about it or something. You are buying an asset when you're paying for medical debt. It's you. You're important. And I don't like the idea that all medical debt is bad. But home, okay, maybe it shouldn't be $450. Maybe it should be $275. But that's good. That's a good thing because you get an asset out of that. your medical bill, maybe you didn't have the insurance or whatever, maybe you paid 10, 15 grand. Well, what a waste. What, to keep you alive? That's important, folks. Medical debt paying for medical expenses is a privilege in the U.S. Those dumb thinkins in Peru that I was just studying wish they could have had medical debt. Instead, they all got wiped out by smallpox and stuff. Okay? It's a good thing, folks. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't make it cheaper. There are ways that it can be cheaper, and it starts with getting the government out of the business of providing health care to people or for paying for people's health care. We can make it a lot cheaper for sure. But it's not automatically a bad thing that you had to pay someone to save your life. Let me know what your thoughts on that are at Good AM Liberty on X. Good AM Liberty for Good Morning Liberty, our daily podcast on X. We got some more Dumb Bleep of the Week coming right up, and then we'll figure out who the winner is.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone. The first UN worker killed in Gaza has been identified as an Indian national. 46-year-old Webhav Anil Kale was killed in Gaza when the vehicle he was travelling in came under attack in Rafah. Jody Jacobs reports from the UN headquarters in New York.
A former Indian Army officer, Webhav Anil Kale, became the first international casualty for the world body since the Israel-Hamas conflict started last year. Colonel Kale reportedly took premature retirement from the Indian Army back in 2022 and joined the UN as a security coordination officer in the Department of Safety and Security just 2 months ago. He was traveling with another security staffer to the European hospital in Rafah when their clearly marked UN vehicle was struck on Monday morning. The UN Secretary General has condemned the attack, calling for a full investigation. Close to 190 UN personnel have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. Most of them, according to the UN, are national staff working for UNRWA. Jody Jacobs, New York.
8 people have been killed and dozens more injured in a bus crash in Florida. Highway Patrol said there were more than 50, quote, migrant workers on board when the bus went off the road early on Tuesday morning. Tony Waterman has more.
According to the Florida Highway Patrol, the bus and a pickup truck sideswiped each other near Gainesville around 6:30 in the morning. The bus veered off the road and went through a fence before overturning. Besides those killed, at least 8 others are critically injured, and officials say dozens more have non-life-threatening injuries. Highway Patrol says the bus was transporting farm workers to a local watermelon farm. They are investigating the cause of the crash. Tony Waterman, Texas.
Donald Trump's one-time lawyer Michael Cohen is being cross-examined on the stand at his ex-boss's criminal trial in New York. Cohen says he was responsible for paying $130,000 in return for a porn star's silence. Prosecutors allege that it was done on behalf of Trump and that he falsified business records to cover up an affair with Stormy Daniels. Benji Heyer reports from outside the courthouse in Manhattan.
Michael Cohen, Trump's fixer-turned-foe, was asked by lawyers, why did you pay that sum of money, $130,000, to Stormy Daniels? He replied, quote, to ensure the story would not come out, would not affect Mr. Trump's chances of becoming president of the United States. He laid out his accounts of events, which effectively imply that Donald Trump personally greenlit this plan in order to avoid it derailing his presidential campaign. That's inside the court report. Outside, Speaker of the House of Representatives Mike Johnson, the third most senior politician in this country, claimed that Donald Trump is innocent of these charges. It's not about justice, he says, it's all about politics.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
Liberty at Night with Nate and Charlie on the Free Talk Live network. Of course, tonight you're only getting Nate because Charlie is traveling on business. I just got back from a vacation to Peru. It's been a wild couple weeks over here at Liberty at Night / Good Morning Liberty, which is our daily podcast that everyone needs to go check out. You guys know the thing. Good Morning Liberty on your favorite browser. Join gmail.com to join our live group. BernieLies.com if you want to get a link to all of our stuff. We are almost done with Dumb Bleep of the Week. That's where we vote on who said the dumbest thing over the past week. Since I was on vacation, it's really over the past 2 weeks because I missed some stuff. But we got a few more left, and in the live group, the Fed Haters Club is going to vote on who said the dumbest thing. Number 8, Joe Biden apparently went on CNN and said a bunch of lies. Here's one dumb thing he said. Well, he was on CNN. They're talking about grocery prices being really high. Well, yeah, grocery prices are high, but look at all this money people have. It's not as much money as the grocery prices went up, but let's not talk about that.
What about, but there's real pain. Grocery prices are up 30%, more than 30%. Since the beginning of the pandemic, and people are spending more on food and groceries than they have at any time really in the past 30 years. That's a real day-to-day pain that people feel.
It really is, and it's real. But the fact is that if you take a look at what the people have, they have the money to spend. It angers them and angers me that you have to spend more. For example, the whole idea of this notion that Senator Casey talked about, shrinkflation. I think it's on your program.
Same price for a smaller bottle of juice or something.
For example, Snickers bar, they did a thing, and it's like 20% less for the same price. That's corporate greed. It's corporate greed, and we've got to deal with it, and that's what I'm working on.
What about?
It's not inflation due to bad monetary policies or bad fiscal policy. It's corporate greed, okay? Yeah, we got a lot more money to spend, but what people are mad about is getting all right, let's go on to the next one here that he said. This was the crazy, actually got fact-checked by people because of what he said.
When you talk about the economy, of course, it is by far the most important issue for voters. It's also true right now, Mr. President, that voters by a wide margin trust Trump more on the economy. They say that in polls. And part of the reason for that may be the numbers. And you're aware of many of these, of course. The cost of buying a home in the United States is double what it was when you look at your monthly costs from before the pandemic. Real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office. Economic growth last week, far short of expectations.
His face looks like it's the first time he's heard this.
Confidence, maybe no surprise, is near a 2-year low. With less than 6 months to go to Election Day, are you worried that you're running out of time to turn that around?
We've already turned it around. Look at the Michigan survey. For 65% of American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape. The polling data has been wrong all along. How many, you guys do a poll with CNN, how many folks you have to call to get one response? The idea that we're in a situation where things are so bad, the folks that, we've created more jobs. We're in a situation where people have access to good paying jobs. And the last I saw, the combination of the inflation, the cost of inflation, all those things, that's really worrisome to people with good reason. That's why I'm working very hard to bring the cost of rentals down, to increase the number of homes that are available. Let me say it this way. When I started this administration, people were saying there's going to be a collapse of the economy. We have the strongest economy in the world. Let me say it again, in the world.
Although GDP last week was far short of expectations.
Oh, it wasn't. Look, GDP is still growing. Look at the response of the markets. overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive. And one of the reasons why people feel good about it not being as strong as it was before is they believe that the Fed's going to respond.
They hope they're going to get a rate cut.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, no president's had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office. 9%. But look, people have a right to be concerned.
I know he already got fact checked on this, but let's do it again. 9% when he came into office. I actually think that they have told this lie so many times, and he's heard the lie so many times, and he's said the lie so many times that in his mind, which is barely there, we all know that, he actually thinks, I think he might think that this is true. I think he might think that he came into office sometime in the middle of 2022 or so. Maybe he doesn't remember how long he's actually been in office at this time. But yeah, when he came into office, inflation was at 1.4%. And that's not because Trump did such a good job on inflation. That's because we were in a pandemic and yeah, prices were going down because people weren't allowed to go anywhere and buy things. And so price inflation, yes, was very low at that time. So I'm not just giving that all to Trump or anything. And I'm not even going to say it's all because of Biden. The crazy part here is that when he talks about inflation, they have talked about this lie so many times now that he actually forgot that inflation went from 1.4% when he took office all the way up to 9.1%. And now it's dropped down to 3.5 since then. And he has only talked about that drop from 9.1 down to 3.5 and never talks about the increase from 1.4 up to 9.1. That he actually thinks that that's true. I'm not even going to call him a liar. I'm just going to call him a senile old man that has no idea what's going on. And she didn't jump in and correct him right there. She probably could have, but maybe she didn't know exactly what inflation was when he came into office. So maybe she didn't know that. She could have said, well, actually 9.1, that happened in 2022. That wasn't in January 2021 when you came to office, but whatever. So that was a pretty big one. And it did get fact checked by many major, like ABC did a little fact check on it. A lot of Snopes did a fact check on it. A bunch of people did fact checks on this. And so that's good. How about number 9, Howard University? We have plenty of stuff to talk about with universities. We're not even going to talk about the Duke walkout when Jerry Seinfeld came up to speak, because he's a Jew, so they left, which is probably could have been something we could talk about. I was more infuriated by this situation at Howard University, where they had a graduation ceremony. And it wasn't that it was ended because of Free Palestine protesters, or anti-Israel, or pro-Hamas, or whatever it is that you want to call them. It was interrupted by the parents of the graduation beating on the glass doors and breaking them because they were mad that there weren't enough seats in the auditorium for all of them. And so they actually had to end the graduation ceremony. And so I'll play you a little news clip of what happened here, which I just think is totally ridiculous. Here's the news clip doesn't show much of this. Here's what was happening outside. All right, so that's the kind of thing that was going on outside. Let's go to the little news clip here from NBC.
What's going on, y'all?
A celebration years in the making for these Howard University students coming to an abrupt ending Thursday as these graduates waited to walk across the stage at the Crampton Auditorium. Just outside of the lobby, dozens of loved ones locked out and some trying to push their way in after being told the building was at capacity.
Because of the size of the room and because our relatives sometimes do not know how to act, the fire department is now here to shut us down.
Administrators doing their best to let the grads get their special moment and grab their diplomas before they cleared the room, but the damage was done.
While they were doing the keynote speaker, there was loud banging. Even before that, for 10 minutes straight, just boom, 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 boom.
After this commotion, pictures showed the broken glass door left behind.
It's sad right now, low-key.
Oh, yeah.
Sad.
I'm just heartbroken.
And dreams shattered for grads like Holly Ragunanan and her family, looking to make up for moments missed during the pandemic.
Glass started getting broken. One of my classmates' hands got cut. I didn't even get to walk. I graduated magna cum laude and I didn't even get to walk. I'm class 2020. I didn't get to walk for my high school graduation. I didn't get to walk for my college graduation.
It's not just the grads who left the canceled commencement disappointed.
All the money we spent, my father and grandmother came down from North Carolina.
And while these grads try to salvage the celebration, not long after, DC Fire sang in a statement. DC Fire and EMS did not shut down tonight's event. At 6:42 p.m., we responded to the Crampton Auditorium for a medical call at the request of campus graduation.
Okay. This is actually one of the more bothering things that we'll talk about in this show. Imagine putting in all this time and effort, and this is the nursing school graduation, and you're going to go walk at your graduation, and you're in an auditorium that's got a certain capacity. Okay, we got fire codes, stuff like that. Maybe these are just a bunch of libertarians out there that think fire codes are BS. I'm not really sure. They were concerned about what would happen if someone were to yell fire in that crowded room, which we all know is illegal. And so they were concerned about what would happen there. And they're so mad that the room is at capacity and they can't let anyone else in that they start a protest and a chant and a riot outside, banging on the glass doors to the point that they break one of the glass doors, and they end up having to end the graduation ceremony while it's going on. And so these parents and family members that are outside, here's the sad part. This is supposed to be a moment for these graduates who went through this school to go up and walk on stage, get their picture, grab their diploma, and have their graduation. And these parents were more concerned that they didn't get to be in the room, that they weren't in there to watch it, that they ended up ruining it for everyone that was there. And I don't know if any of them got to do it. They were doing the keynote speaker. I guess they maybe hadn't done any of the diplomas yet. The selfishness of that is something that's hard to understand. And it sort of makes me worried about the future when this is these people's parents. I feel bad for the students that are there. I especially feel bad for the students whose parents were the ones that were out there causing all the commotion. And the parents that were out there banging on the doors deserve to be punched in the face. But it's not for the parents. I get that there's seats out there exactly teed up. It's not their day. It's for the graduates. The graduates are the ones who spent years in this college doing the work, you know. They just did the work. They learned how to protest every day, you know. It's hard stuff at these colleges. And they get to finally walk. And then to have that ruined by parents who were mad that they didn't get to be in the room, it's gross. It's something. It says something bad about hopefully not the entire society. Hopefully it just says something bad about these specific people that were in that room. But I fear that it says something more about our society. So that's Dumb Bleep number 9. We got 2 more. Stick with me. 2 more. Okay, Dumb Bleep number 10. Thomas Massie had to correct Jerry Nadler. All right, he reads the Second Amendment aloud for people, and from what I can tell, intentionally holds out a very important word. That's the really important part here, because he's reading. He even reads a comma. He said there's a comma in the line, and he says, comma, and then he almost says a word, and he skips over it. You can hear him do it. You can hear him decide to skip over this. And so listen to this video, and luckily we have people like Thomas Massie out there to make these corrections.
The Second Amendment reads, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, comma, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. It is clearly a right The founding fathers, the framers, were opposed to standing armies. They thought that those were instruments of tyranny and that a militia is what should be had. And the Second Amendment was a guarantee, was framed as a guarantee that you could have a militia, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. And that was its understanding for 200 years until the radical Supreme Court in the Heller decision upended 200 years of constitutional interpretation and said that the Second Amendment has nothing to do with militias. It's a personal and basically unlimited right. The Supreme Court was wrong in that decision.
Happy to yield the gentleman from Kentucky. Apologies to Ranking Member Nadler if this isn't what he stated, but I think he might have left out some key words when he read the Second Amendment. And I'll read it here. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I'm not sure if I heard him say the people.
Yeah, you didn't hear him say the people. You heard him almost say the people because he was reading off of a piece of paper and he decided not to say the people. And then he goes on to explain that the Second Amendment was a right to have a militia, which is not even a right that we have protected still. We should talk about that someday. Pretty bad when you have people in Congress that are willing to... Imagine you're actually reading text of a document and you just... Not only are you lying, you just decide to not say a couple words because they go against the point that you're currently making. Everyone has access to these words, and we all know this, and I signed up to protect and defend this as well. And to make my point, I'm just going to purposefully leave out the words that go against the point that I'm trying to make right now and hope that no one says anything back to me. Like I said, thank God we have people like Thomas Massie in Congress. And speaking of the fact that we have people like Thomas Massie in Congress, I'm going to add this on to Dumb Bleep number 10. Thomas Massie voted against Speaker Johnson. You know, they tried to take him out of there. He's still in there. And the day after he voted against Speaker Johnson, AIPAC, which is the Israel lobby in Congress, so like literally a foreign government lobby in Congress that tries to put people in place in our government that will do things to favor another foreign government. AIPAC announced that they're going to do a $300,000 ad buy against Thomas Massie. He said, I hope Americans see what's happening here. And so there's this little news article. AIPAC Super PAC set to run TV ads blasting Thomas Massie's Israel record. And what they mean by Israel record is that Thomas Massie always votes against foreign aid. He always votes against war funding. He voted against whatever anti-Semitism bills and stuff like that because they're way too broad and they're ridiculous and anti-free speech. And so now they're going to run ads blasting him about his Israel record. Things like this are pretty disgusting that we have this going on in the U.S. We actually have lobbyists for a foreign government that are trying to control what people get elected in the United States to make sure that they vote to give money to this foreign government. Now, it was bad when that Menendez guy was taking gold bars to do stuff on behalf of Egypt or whoever it was. You know, that's a bad thing. You wouldn't want a congressman bought off by a foreign government, you know, who's directing money and legislation that would benefit that foreign government. That's a bad thing. But we have a foreign government super PAC that's going to try and get rid of Thomas Massie, one of the most libertarian guys that we have he's the most libertarian guy that we have in the U.S. Congress, representatives and Senate. We know that. Gross. That's Dumb Bleep number 10. And let's go to number 11, just for fun, from USA Today. Let's talk about these women that are signing up for rage rituals because you got to have something fun. This is a way for them to release suppressed emotions and reconnect with themselves. Why not end with something fun and ridiculous for Dumb Bleep of the Week? Here we go. It says, it's time to rage. Rage rituals are getting attention on social media, especially from women. Participants scream and sometimes beat large sticks on the ground Say, give it to them. To release emotions they're often discouraged from expressing. Yes. Discouraged. They say when people do this and give themselves permission to release their anger, their capacity for joy actually expands. Look at that. Look at that. You see, we've been suppressing all these women all this time. And it's just not right. Women should be able to beat people to death with sticks. You know? And they have been suppressed from showing these emotions. This is not an uncommon thing. You have those, what are those rooms called where you go and you just break stuff, you know? There's like glass and there's plates and TVs and stuff in there and you go and you just beat it with, rage rooms. Like people do this. You let out your anger because there's a deep-seated human emotion that we have to beat people to death with items that are in our hands, you know? Right? And we've all been suppressed and discouraged from exercising these emotions in the world. But specifically women. You see, we encourage men to beat people up with baseball bats and sticks and stuff like that, and out in the woods. You know, it's a common thing that we do, and we just don't let women do it these days. And so I wanted to let all the women out there know, anytime you got a perfect stick in your hand, if you're walking around and you found the best stick, and you feel like you want to just beat someone up with it, with all your rage, you just go ahead and do it. Just go ahead and do it. And if society tells you not to, it's society that's wrong. All right, there's Dumb Bleep of the Week, everyone. 11 selections for you. We had number 1, the fake meat ban. Number 2, the Newsom deficit. Number 3, direct file. Number 4, the Hochul Black Bronx computer. Number 5, Clinton on disinformation. Number 6, the bans off our bodies. 7, BS medical debt. Number 8, Bidenomics. Number 9, the parents at Howard. Number 10, Nadler, Thomas Massey, AIPAC. Number 11, rage rituals out there. So let's all get your votes in. Go to the Dumb Bleep of the Week voting channel. They're already in there. Let's get everyone voting. While you're voting, I'm going to tell you to go to BarneyLies.com. That'll give you a link to every single thing that we have. The videos are uploaded to YouTube sometime after the show. This one, I guarantee you, will be uploaded sometime after the show. And so you want to go on YouTube and watch that if you want to see my pretty face and my hat that I always wear for the shows and my black t-shirt and all that. You want to see what I look like while I'm talking to you, then do that. Once again, I'll remind you, our co-host, Charlie Thompson, he's not here. These shows are normally very different. 2 people talking is different from 1 person talking, in case you weren't aware. And so you want to maybe go back and listen to some of those episodes. You'll have to go back a couple weeks, I guess. Or just be patient. We will return to our regularly scheduled programming at some point in the future. I guarantee you it's going to happen. Go to GodHatesFeds.com. Get yourself a God Hates Feds t-shirt or a mug, a Javier Milei shirt or a Ron Paul shirt or something like that. Go in there, get yourself some type of merch item. You can go to JoinGML.com if you want to be one of the people that's voting for Dumb Bleep of the Week right now. You see, they get to decide what the dumbest bleep was. You don't, dear listener. You just get to listen. You have no power right now. You have no control. You're letting these other people control you and decide what the dumbest bleep of the week is. They get to decide what goes to Dumb Bleep of the Year and who gets a trophy at the end of the year. They're the ones who make these decisions on your behalf. Are you okay with that? Have you voted for them to be your representative for what you thought the dumbest thing that you heard on this show was? If you have not, then you need to go to joingml.com and pay as little as $7 a month. Nadler, Massey, Dumb Bleep, number 10. That is the winner for this week. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us on this beautiful Tuesday evening here in Nashville, Tennessee. We hope to see you again next Tuesday. And if you can't wait a whole week, then you know the thing. You go find Good Morning Liberty on your favorite podcast app. 1,239 episodes for you guys to listen to. If not, we'll see you next Tuesday.
wine in a box? I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. Technically, it's in a bag in a box, a plastic bladder with an airtight valve, and boxed wine has been around for years, although you might not have recognized label brands until recently, as name vineyards have followed frugal shoppers who pay lots less for the equivalent of 4 bottles. How? Cardboard boxes and plastic bags are much less expensive packaging than glass bottles, which cost more to ship, production of which asks more of the environment,